So I'm going to be very clear with you guys. I will be speaking with Lauren Southern. This is not a debate. It wasn't prefaced as a debate. We haven't talked about it being a debate. It's literally just like she thought that my review of her and the serfs and the other people talking was funny. And she said that she would be totally down to have a conversation. And I just want to ask her questions specifically about her debate approach, her prep, and her philosophy behind having conversations, because I think she's a very strong debater. That's my opinion. That's where I'm at with it. I've seen her smoke people quite a few times before. I've seen her get smoked before, like in the Destiny conversation that they first had together, right? Where he had prepped a bunch of economical arguments about immigration, and she kind of immediately tries to backpedal out of any immigration takes she had that were based on economic premises. And anytime that she was pushed on and finally had to argue on the economic premises, she was blown out of the water because her prep was insufficient. There are expectations that people have of me because I'm talking to somebody that people don't like. And when somebody doesn't like somebody, they really want you to kind of say mean things about them. I don't debate people. I don't argue with people. Even with my friends, like behind the scenes, I'll generally dip out of an argument really quick if I feel like we're getting cyclical at all with it. So I'm not a guy that likes like getting into debates or arguments anymore, really. That really applies to this Lauren Southern thing. The reason why I want to talk to Lauren Southern is because I think that she's a strong opponent to face in a debate. Whether you agree with her positions or not, I think that we could all agree that she is a strong debater. She is somebody who, when we have our lefterly allies that we want to talk to her, we often encourage them to do a lot of prep and to go in ready for a fight because it's going to be difficult, right? And good to see it true from Gappy V. She's a very strong debater, and the right has quite a few very strong debaters. I would argue that Rob Noor is often an unsung hero in terms of like being good at debate. You know, again, you may disagree with his positions, you may disagree with some of his societal desires or what he thinks about people in society and yada yada, but he's a strong debater. It's difficult to face off with him. I think that you could learn a lot from their approach, or learn a lot from questions regarding their prep, or learn a lot from their philosophy of conversation. And beyond that, when you're that good of a debater, I think it's also helpful to get some insight into what do they feel good rhetoric is? What do they feel was very convincing, even from the other side of the aisle? These are the kinds of questions that I really want to pose to Lauren. It's not a bunch of questions that are meant to dredge up her past or to look at like more yikesy aspects of what she believes in, because she definitely believes in some yikesy shit, but that's just not what I do, right? And if I did want to do that, I would need to be prepared for a fight, because again, if somebody is a debater and they're a very strong debater, this is a gear that they shift into once you engage with them, right? If you try to confront somebody about a position that they have, they're going to snap into debate mode, and then it turns into a debate, right? That's not at all what my intention is with the Lauren Southern thing. It's not something I'll be prepping for. It's not something that I want to do. The only reason that we're going to have any questions in there that are on her beliefs or that are on her prior takes is because the audience demands it. You guys would be very, very upset with me if I didn't at least take a few questions to touch on some topics that you want covered. That's the only reason that I'm including it, and it's quite begrudgingly. Like, I wish we weren't on a platform where that was the case. And even doing this, I want to appease the people that it's meant to appease, and I have to accept that moving into it. I think part of the maturity on this platform is realizing that, like, while you definitely should go out of your way at least somewhat to kind of confront hate or to like get ahead of it a little bit, I think you also in a lot of ways have to like accept whatever amount of effort you put into that, and accept that it won't be enough for a lot of people. And that's what's going to happen tomorrow. Is about 20 to 30% of our talk is going to be spent on questions regarding immigration opinions that she has, or political opinions that she has, or problems that people have with her, and hearing her out on it. And because I can't debate her, because I can't argue with her, unfortunately, and I think this is the worst of both worlds, I just have to let her say her piece, maybe give one or two little follow-up questions, and move on. Which, in my opinion, is worse than just not asking her the questions at all. But if they're not included, then I feel like I'm going to get needless shit for that. So you know, basically the TLDR on the Lauren Southern situation is I have to give some kind of concession to you guys, and I have to ask the questions that you're looking to ask. I talk to people behind the scenes that I trust and respect, and then I talked to DGG, the Discord, and I got in a voice call with like 20 fucking people or something, and I heard them all out on what their problems were with her and what they would like to see me cover. So, you know, I'm trying to get a feel for what the audience is looking for in that regard. What I've been happy to hear a lot of, like, from different people is that they think it's unreasonable, the expectations that are being placed on me to like do all this stuff. And I would agree. And it's mostly just to appease a select group of people that want me to mention it somewhat. And I really want to make clear to everybody that I know the problems you have with this, but it's like, platforming is a very stupid thing to talk about. I got a very tiny platform. She has a much bigger platform. Platforming isn't really the issue here. Letting her ideas go unchallenged. This isn't a platform to challenge your fucking ideas. It really isn't. So I don't really want to hear that either. It's mostly just a nod and in a wink to the audience. Like, yes, I hear you. I know she said some stupid shit. She did some stupid shit. We'll talk about it. You know, she's not happy that that's going to have to be a part of it, but she knows that it is, you know, because she's had to talk about it a gazillion times. And I don't think this time is going to be any different. I think we're going to get her standard response, which she's given like a gazillion times to these questions about the immigration thing, about being on that boat, about white replacement. We're going to hear those things. And then there's going to be some ignorant chunk of the audience that knows nothing about Lauren Southern and demands that the videos are privated when they're already privated. And, you know, like, there's a lot of people that are just ignorant about what her content is or what she talks about or like what she does nowadays or what she's even changed in this rebranding thing. Like, people are saying she's rebranded and she's doing a refocus. And like, I feel like there are definitely some like things that she's doing that have sparked this and caused a few people to have that take. But I think that there's like 80 to 90% of people have just heard that come from somewhere and they just repeat it, because every single like normie that I've pushed on like, why do you think she's rebranding and whatever, they all have very different answers, or they just admit that they have no reason at all. It's just something that they've heard. And that goes for a lot of things around her. So like, I don't know if people are very educated on like what she's about or what she does at all, or what she like believes in or how those beliefs have changed. So ultimately, I think it's just like a blind hatred of her, or a hatred triggered by like a few videos that she's done that are really dumb. So, you know, that's where I'm at with that. I'll spend 20 to 30% of the conversation on that, and the rest of it I'm going to spend on stuff I'm actually interested in and that my platform is for, which is going into how are you doing debate prep? What is your approach to people? What do you think of your opposition? What are some good arguments on both sides of the fence that you've been on? These kinds of things, because that's what I'm interested in. And I really think from a utilitarian perspective that asking her questions about how she does prep or how she approaches the conversation or tips that she has for debaters are things that everybody can use. Like it wouldn't matter if you're you know, a lefty or a righty or a centrist or whatever. Like, those kinds of answers are things that everybody can use. And if you like want to argue with people, or you want to argue with her in particular, then, you know, you can always use that in your prep against her, or in your prep to support her the way that Connor did and fight on her side.
Booksmarts, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me, and I guess you're streaming live on your end as well. I didn't get to catch any of it because I was a bit too busy, but I saw you did a conversation with Destiny before. I do love that I've kind of, I don't know, there's like this cult-like fear of me. I've amassed this identity from the Twitch community as this neo-Nazi queen that must be vanquished by people. And it's just very funny to me because I'm like sitting in my pajamas eating nachos and taking care of my 1-year-old while people think I'm plotting to destroy the planet.
Like, I don't know. I was talking to him because it's more so audience like management. Like, I understand how people like view you, and I understand how people think about you. And what's really difficult is to do what I want to do in this conversation while at the same time appeasing people that want it to be something else.
But do those people deserve to be appeased? Or are you just appeasing toxic members of your own side the same way that people criticize me for having appeased perhaps toxic members of my side?
Well, well, this is the difficult thing is like, I don't do sides and stuff because normally all that I do is like review these conversations. I never ever talk about politics on the channel. I never advocate for anything. I don't really talk about policy ever. So like, these are people that are completely not a part of my community. They don't really understand what I do on the channel. And I think that's part of the frustration from my end is like, I've like said that Rob Nora is a good debater. I've said you're a good debater. I've said that Milo Yiannopoulos, when he's on his game, is a scary person to debate, right? Like I can talk about people who are strong debaters independent of whatever ideology they support. And like I can say Vosh is a good debater, even if I think his ideology can be wonky, right? Like to give one lefterly example. And so like the difficult thing is when I do something like this and you make it difficult because you're doing some kind of like rebranding tour or something. Could you like explain to me what that's what they say?
Everyone is like, Lauren is trying to be a centrist now. She's trying to portray herself as a liberal. I've never said any of that. The only time I have used the word centrist is to say I am not one. We need to reference J-Rig on that one. Centricide, my friends. So, like people invent these narratives in their head about these insidious motivations I have. They're like, this is Lauren Mask on. She's trying to present herself as a liberal. And I'm like, I will literally say in a stream that, hey, I'm a conservative. And they still think this is like some big rebranding tour. When I came back to media, I said I didn't want to be a part of any circles. Like I am a conservative that doesn't want to be a part of like the mega group, or I am in the right wing and I constantly affirm the right wing because that's my group, that's my cult. So I'm a conservative, but if I'm proven wrong on something, I'm willing to change my opinion. If someone is a left-winger that I happen to agree with or think is intelligent and has good analysis, I'm going to do that. Whereas I can definitely see when I was in these groups in 2016, there are some of these cult-like dynamics where it's like, whoa, you spoke to a lefty and treated them like a human. That is unacceptable. And that's just some people. That's not everyone. And, everyone would even have these chat groups where people would just post their tweets and they're like, you have to retweet it because we're part of the same group that just repeatedly, share each other's content. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be that. I want to be my own entity with my own ideas. I am conservative. And also in my documentaries, I do not think, and videos, I do not think I have to misrepresent left-wing viewpoints. I don't think I have to make them a comical version of themselves in order for my own viewpoints to prevail. Because if I felt the need to only observe leftist views from a comical perspective and was too scared to engage with them in their steelman mode, then that would probably mean that I was concerned about my own beliefs on a deep level and I thought there was something flawed about them because I was worried about them being challenged. So in my last documentary, Crossfire, I had a head of the chapter of BLM go in and give his whole spiel, and we steel-manned it in the documentary because I don't think it took away from the general consensus of the documentary at all to portray his opinion accurately. So that's kind of, I want to always ensure, I don't always do this, but I do want to observe and have a dialogue with people on the left and try to understand them best I can. And if I change my views, awesome. If not, awesome. Depends on what's true and what I believe are the best arguments there.
Okay. And to get this out of the way is like a direct message, not to you, but more so to the audience. Like the advice that Steven gave me was to kind of manage the expectations of the audience for this conversation. I don't want to debate you about your positions. You have plenty of things that like I think gets you a lot in a lot of trouble that you believe in. You've done things that have gotten you in trouble and that people interpret one way or the other, sometimes overextending in what they're attributing to you, right? Which is something that upsets you a lot. And what I really want to focus on here is like getting some foundational understanding of how you're looking at the world, how you're looking at criticism, because criticism is something that follows you like the plague follows the reaper, and tackle some of the stuff that you wanted to change that I saw in your video about coming back. For instance, what you're talking about here was steel manning positions that are maybe contrary to your own perspective or that lie on the other side of the aisle from what you would normally cover. So to start on that, like if you were to steelman some of these positions of the people who are criticizing you, if you were to steelman or pick some of the best criticisms against you that you've had to confront since coming back to the platform, what are those and how are you tackling them?
So you mean like the people criticizing me or my content, or just a general level?
Yeah.
You mean the people that say I like shoot migrants with flares and stuff? These people?
Or yeah, like obviously you don't agree with those people. So I'm saying like you had to have looked at this huge body of like critical people, and there has to be some hint of truth that you've seen here and there where you've made corrections in your content, in your approach, in your view of yourself. And I'm trying to see, have you seen those things? And if so, where are they? And how are you addressing them?
Okay, so I did have a conversation with Destiny about this, where I was talking to him about how it's really difficult for me to analyze what from a public perspective they feel I have genuinely done wrong, because I do want to understand if someone criticizes me, especially if there's someone close to me. I really want to understand, you know, what have I done wrong here? How can I do better? And that is less important to me in a public sphere because they don't know my actual opinions. They don't know me as an individual person, but I'm still a public figure, so I do care. But when I go to that sphere to try to say, all right, I'm here, let's see what you have to say to me, let's see what you have to criticize, oftentimes they are wildly exaggerated claims, things that I know are not true. So I immediately have to toss that aside and be like, okay, that person's criticism of me is just not based on reality. And sometimes I'll have people on my own side that are like, she can do no wrong. And so I'm in this terrible situation where when it comes to the public's perception of me, it's really difficult to analyze like how I can accurately work on myself in the public sphere, because there's on a personal level, I have leftist friends that will criticize me, that know me well, that I can take back good feedback. But on the public square, I don't even know how to address it. So one of the people in response to your tweet that you were talking to me said, this woman inspired a mass shooter, blah, 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 blah. So I replied to him with a long form video I made addressing that claim, showing it was false. And he just replies, like, I don't give a fuck, Nazi, right? And I'm like, I literally do not know how to engage with your criticism, because I don't think people that want an apology from me, I don't think people who want me to change or whatever even know what I've done or what I think or what they want me to apologize for, because oftentimes they're asking me to apologize for things I've never done. So I'm like, and even if I did, I don't think they would care, because I think it's a political game to them. I don't think it's about me genuinely. I don't think it's about the political discourse or getting to truth. I think a lot of that is a political game. Now, you asked me to steelman it, so I'll try my best to steelman it here. I think a lot of these people do trust mainstream media sources. I think a lot of these people will read content or quotes from me that have been taken out of context, in my opinion, and will say, this is what Lauren feels. If you go to my Wikipedia page, it says I'm a white supremacist in the first paragraph. It says I'm alt-right. It says I tried to stop migrant boats. Like, dude, you know, you read that stuff and it's like, well, Lauren, this is who you are. Or they look at Lauren associated with these groups that have white identitarian beliefs. Lauren associated with these figures that have said far-right things. And they would say, Lauren, this must clearly be your beliefs. This must clearly be your approach to politics. And for me, like, they can assert that and I can reply, no, that's not my beliefs. I don't want to kill all brown people. I don't want zero immigration. Sure, we can talk about why or how I associated with certain groups, but that's a different conversation to you asserting what I believe personally when you don't know it. So that's the difficulty there.
So a lot of difficulties, but not a single thing that you could see that anybody said that, like, you're like, oh yeah, maybe I fucked up there.
Okay, no. Let's think about that. Definitely approach in my previous videos where I've been going on the ground and like, so let's look at my rape culture video that I did. That was one of my big, people were just getting introduced to me, and I held up a sign at a protest that said, rape culture in the West is a myth or something. you know, that is not exactly the best way to engage with people that disagree with me. That is going to be a way that will inflame them initially to say and have the most absurd responses rather than really engage with their ideas and their thoughts and try to slowly take them apart or have them convince me. So some of my approaches have definitely been to deliberately expose what I viewed as irrational approaches to politics. So I've had my feminism or Islam video where I just go up to protesters and I'm like, feminism or Islam, which one would you pick? And they just blow up. And you know, there's a deep conversation to have about that topic. And I do think in the end, it is an absurd, you know, uniting of ideas that don't really mesh in a lot of ways. But there's no doubt that I went in there knowing they were going to just freak out and not be their best position and best foot put forward. So there are absolutely aspects of me that I have to pull back that enjoy just taking the piss out of these people and not really trying to get to the core of the argument and not really trying to steelman them, but just trying to make them mad because I found it funny. So I think that that is a fair criticism of me.
Okay. I can work with this. This isn't going as bad as I had initially anticipated. So, like, do you think it's fair to say that you're a bit like trolly or contrarian in that regard? Like, it makes you happy to like kind of irk people or shake their snow globe a little bit in that way?
Yeah. So that it comes from a position when I was younger, like when I just got into this, because I got into this when I was a teenager. I think people don't realize it was definitely, I do believe in these things, but it's also hysterical to see all these people who hate me reacting this way. And now I have to kind of control it because I see all these people screaming irrational accusations at me, and I just want to bring that back and be like, all right, I'm just gonna piss you off. You know what? You want me to be Nazi queen? I may not believe in any of that, but fine. Let's take the piss. Like, let's have fun here. Because I'm never going to convince them one way or the other. And I have to hold that back and realize, Lauren, these are a few people. There are people that do want to have a conversation. And if you react this way to them, they're going to see that and just assume that's how you engage with politics all the time. That's your belief. So I am trying to control that. Just, you know what? Like, fuck you guys. I'm just gonna take the piss out of you. And I'm really trying to control that and be like, no, I actually do believe that I have reasonable viewpoints that can engage, and I can meet ground with a lot of leftists in a lot of ways, definitely in descriptive analysis of the problems in the world. And we usually just disagree on how we can achieve the results. And I need to try to pursue that more if I want to settle down the extremes on both ends of the spectrum that are just wild right now. I think certainly in the Zoomer generation, I don't think like liberals and conservatives exist anymore. It's like you're a fascist or you're a communist in a lot of ways on these platforms, obviously not everywhere.
And as somebody that works on like optics and rhetoric, and that's kind of mostly where I'm known to like give people advice, like, hey, you're giving this person a lot of footholds, for instance, to believe that you wanted to sink all the people in that ship when you're stopping what is a rescue vessel from helping the people aboard that ship. Like, people are going to take that and they're going to go 5 steps further from what is the truth. And like, but you let them get that close because you were only 5 steps away from that bit of misinformation. And so I think having strategies that take into account how people are going to misconstrue the things that you're doing or the things that you're saying is helpful. And like, you mix this, like, you're getting them 5 steps close to that conclusion with like, you love triggering people and you love upsetting them. Like, and this is a gnarly combination because you're going to get as close to that line as you can within the bounds of what you believe in. And unfortunately, as close to the line as you can is enough for a lot of people to say, this person's crossing the line. That's too much. Like, because where you're drawing the line with your own understanding of your own beliefs on the inside is not how other people are doing it on the outside. And it's certainly not how people who think opposite of you will. So I'm happy to hear that, like, you recognize that contrarian kind of trolliness in you, and you realize that, like, you know, cutting back on that is going to help you with reaching across to the other side or reaching consensus on a lot more stuff. But I wonder, like, internally, what are you doing to correct for that? Like, what are some like mental exercises, or like, where are some moments where you feel like you're putting the brakes on, and what problems are you running into in like deploying that tactic?
Okay, so I did a video called Feelings Don't Care About Your Facts, and it was a whole analysis of a lot of internal dialogue I had been having over the last year, where I am I would have a problem with only analyzing the factual side of conversations and not really analyzing how they impacted people on a social or emotional level, which, you know, as time goes by, more life experience, I've realized is actually the reason politics exists. We don't partake in politics so that we can get numbers and charts looking a certain way. We partake in politics so that we can have happy communities that enjoy life and love each other for these emotional motivations, right? So facts are just something that help us achieve emotional ends. We want happiness, we want love, we want goodness. And the fact that I'd spent so much time ignoring this whole half of the equation boggles my mind to this day and is something that I've had to really adjust. So to explain what my brain was doing when I went into that protest with the feminists and held up a sign saying, you know, there is no rape culture in the West, is my brain was like, okay, pillar one, let's look at the culture and the aspects of culture. So we've got like the law, we've got like television and media, we've got academia, all these big pillars of our civilization. The law, absolutely against rape. You prove someone has raped someone, they're gonna put you in jail. Media, dude, like you even get slightly accused of brushing a girl's leg unconsensually, some people are losing their jobs over that kind of stuff. Academia, definitely against rape. And I was like, how can you say we live in a culture that supports rape? Bam, I'm just going to go there and tell them the truth. This is a false analysis. Now, of course, they have deeper arguments for there are institutions which cover it up. There are aspects of our culture that let it go ignored. To me, that is a different question about, I wouldn't say that that is the culture at large, but aspects and institutions which have been used to or difficult processes. Like it's not the police deliberately trying to make it so women can't go to the police and report a rape. It's just the process is really difficult to prove this stuff. And we do have to keep into mind innocent until proven guilty. And so those are conversations I could have had with these women, and it would have been really interesting to take that apart. But my brain was just like, nah, they're wrong. I need to go and tell them and show the world that they're wrong. And now I've kind of realized, no, I have to take into account the emotional investment that they have in this. Some of these women may have been raped and they have an extreme reasonably an extreme emotional response to this political situation, and I need to take that into account. I need to take into account the social aspect of this conversation, how talking so bluntly and so harshly to people would impact our society at large if we did that to everyone, and the ability for us to understand each other rather than take steps to guide other people through that mental process that I went through. So I spent so much time just announcing the conclusions of my mental process and not taking and assuming if you didn't go through the same mental process as me, you're just a fucking idiot and you should know anyways. Whereas that's not the case. There are a lot of things that I have progressed and changed my mind on that it took a long time of mental progress, traveling and engaging with the world to change my conclusion. And I should not expect any less of other people, you know?
Yeah. And I'll put a pin in that because I am curious what some of those things would be. But before we lose this, this process that you're applying of understanding where other people are coming from emotionally, or understanding how the context of something plays into how it's interpreted, like you going to a rally to do this would be very, very different than if you just said it on your YouTube channel, right? Like going to people who may actually be victims is very, very different than saying these things on your own platform. Could you not then apply this kind of reasoning to things like what you did on that boat and understand why people were so upset about it? Like, could you not apply this to other criticisms and then be able to steelman them and understand where those people are coming from in more situations? Because you were still unable to like name criticisms that you could steelman at the very beginning of this.
Okay, can we put the boat on hold for a second? I just want to quickly ask you a question. So do you understand why so many people, like that video that I did where I put up that sign at the feminist slut walk, it went viral, like millions of views, people loved it. Do you understand why so many people liked that video despite me taking that approach, which now I'm analyzing as having some issues?
I think you were appealing to a lot of extreme people on your side and moderate people on your side who alike can enjoy people on the other side getting put in awkward positions. I think that's at least part of it. And then another huge part is
steelman why people might like it.
Can I steelman why people might not like it? Because they believe that they're, yeah, but okay. So audience, Remember, I'm trying to be very careful to avoid the ideology thing, but I'm trying to, I'll work with Lauren here. So I think, from my understanding of people on the right, that they see a lot of hypocrisy in lefterly ideas. And they see a lot of places where you're turning a blind eye to certain parts of a culture or a policy that you're advocating, and you're not seeing how like there's overlap in some of the things that you want to accomplish and how those things are contradicted by other things you're trying to defend. So if you're talking about feminism and Islam, if you have a very extreme version in your mind of what Islam is, and you think that some of the central tenets of that religion are quite anti-feminist in their application in places where Islam takes over, like maybe right now in Afghanistan, then you can start to wonder why leftists promote Islam if that's going against the, right? Is that fair? Like hypocrisy might be a huge thing there?
Sure. The video I was referring to was the one before I did the feminism versus Islam. I did a few of these slut walk ones, but could you, there are a lot of young men, and myself as well, in university settings that are constantly being told, like, you need to learn not to rape women. And you know what? Maybe there are some absolute morons who do need to hear that message, and that's unfortunate. But for the most part, most men know rape is wrong. For the most part, most men know that our culture they know that our culture is against rape and they don't want to rape. I think that is most men. Do I think there is a subsection of really bad people that unfortunately usually abuse a large amount of women? Of course, I do think that exists. But now, most men constantly being told this narrative and being demonized for it when they have done nothing personally, I think...
I have to pause you. I have to pause you because like, it's not just that, like, we're looking at like, oh, well, of course, there's some subsect of men that are evil that don't know rape is wrong, and most men know that rape is wrong. I think that, like, you're not steel manning what people want out of this. It's not that they want to tell men that rape is wrong. It's that they want men to understand a broader definition of rape, a broader definition of sexual harassment, to realize that some of the things that they may think is not impactful at all, or might not constitute sexual harassment, might not constitute rape, do, and that you need to be more careful about looking out for situations where you might be engaging that behavior, or other people might engage in that behavior that you have kind of subconsciously normalized. Like, I think that is the most steelmanny way of putting that. I don't think it's like they want people to understand rape is wrong. Like, I feel like that's a real shallow way of putting it.
Okay, I can accept that. I think that's fair. But I'm sure you've also heard the argument, if you start with a lie, people aren't going to believe anything else you say. Men living in a culture where every day they are being told rape is wrong, where every institution talks about how rape is bad, where rape is illegal, and if you're proved to have raped someone, you go to jail, and being told we live in a culture that is a pro-rape culture, they're probably not going to listen to anything else you say. Can you see that as a problem? And we can admit that my approach to challenging that was dumb. We can admit that. But can you see that starting with a lie?
Yeah, but those are people who have the same problem that you're having here, where they heard the thing up front and they stopped, like they didn't really think about it any deeper. They didn't try to steelman it. Like, I think that the problems that you talked about in the very beginning of this with steelmanning and stuff are problems a lot of people have that they need to get better at. So yeah, on its face, yeah, that seems dumb. Like, everybody should know that rape is wrong. But like, that's not what was meant there, as I just explained. And all it would take is listening to people a little bit deeper to understand that part of it. But that's the step that people aren't doing. So while I would agree that, yeah, some people are going to do that, they're going to tune out because they think that's a dumb way of putting it and they already know better. I think that that's a failure on their part right there. And that if they choose to do that.
Do we live in a rape culture, in your opinion? Like, does the general Western culture support rape?
No, not in my opinion.
So how is that people misunderstanding what is being said by these people?
Because they're not looking a few steps deeper. They're not trying to be charitable to that side of things. Like, would I listen to the people saying that the people of the West support and endorse rape? Like, no, because that's a bit crazy. But if you listen to the reasonable people that are the ones who are like in academia that are pushing these things, it's more so talking about educating people on how their relationships, how their interactions with women are like flawed. But like, again, I don't want to get into debating you about this stuff, right? Because
I think you know that there's a problem with that. Because if I
admitted that.
And I said black people are all criminals, And then you were like, but Lauren, that's simply not true. And I said, well, you're not thinking about the deeper argument being made here. Like, there's a lot of data that shows there's criminality among blacks, blah, blah, blah. You need to think of it. No, if the first statement that you're talking about is a statement that you have to reject logically because it doesn't add up with what is going on in reality, then why are you trying to defend that? Well, you need to think of the context when it's clear that my question is about that statement directly. I'm sure there's lots of conversation to have beyond that.
You're going to push me into a place where I'm not going to look optically or rhetorically good, but you picked the wrong one with that, because I'm actually somebody that's of the belief. Well, like, you're pushing me to a place where I think most people generally concede to you, but I wouldn't. I think that when people are saying things like that, and there's a large group of them, that you have to listen to where that's coming from. You have to dig deeper into that. Then you need to work at that level with those people to pull them out of it, or to like understand enough to maybe like go, oh, okay, you don't mean what you just said in a single sentence. You mean like subpoint A and B and C, and subpoints B and C are things that I think can be addressed or explained to you in a way to where you won't say it in this like abbreviated way, right? Or you won't turn people off.
I agree with you though.
Yeah, I know you don't. So I'm just saying, like, my answer to that is probably not what you're going to expect. I do think that you need to dig deeper into that with that statement the same way you would with the rape statement. I apply that equally to both sides of things.
If a leftist freaked out that someone said all black people are criminals, you would say, listen, you need to give them a chance and you need to actually try to understand their beliefs and dig deeper. That would be your response?
That's what it is when I'm on stream. Yeah, like, you have to dig deeper into that. Like, especially if you're in a debate with somebody in particular, which is normally the context where I have this, you have to try to understand what's going on with that if you want to change their mind at all, because that's generally part of your purpose in the debate. Or you want to kind of change the mind of the people that are that kind of agree with that statement from that person, right? And in either case, you need to understand that better. So in the context of debates, for sure.
Would you agree that there's a difference between digging deeper and trying to understand and accepting the statement they've made? Because I think you can do both. I think I can, well, I'll admit, I did not do it in that rape culture video I did, but I think you can balance both. You can say, I reject your analysis. I reject that we live in a rape culture. I reject that all black people are criminals, and I want to make that known and why. But also, I'm sure there are reasons you came to these conclusions, and let's analyze that. Let's talk about the actual data you're looking at. Let's talk about the reasons.
Yep.
Can you not have both there?
You can. Yeah. That would be what I would advocate for.
Right. Okay, well then we agree.
Awesome. And in the future, I may like do an X that I don't want to like get into like a too much of a back and forth with you, because again, I'm already taking a super huge optical hit talking to you, and my focus is not necessarily on these like back and
crazy that sounds. Just sorry.
I don't think it's crazy, Lauren. You've done some crazy shit. You've made some dumb fucking videos. Like
it's true. Like what you were saying is true, that it's optically bad to talk to me. But I just think it's crazy that the internet has gotten to that point where instead of having genuine political discussions with people and trying to convince people that disagree with you, it's like, this is an optical mistake. You can't, like, because the word optics to me doesn't sound like genuine politics. It sounds like I'm trying to shift. Be shifty to appear one way or the other, but I don't think you're trying to do that. You're just making a genuine statement about how things are perceived, and that is important, and that's something I've had to learn. I just think it's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Personally, I know it's not to the world.
It sucks if you always want to be a straight shooter, or even worse, if you want to like play around with the ideas and be playful with them and whatever. Like I can understand that, because I used to be in a similar position to you where I thought, I'm just going to be honest, I'm going to shoot you straight, and if you're going to be dumb, I'm going to be dumb right back to you. But like, it just really doesn't help, as you mentioned, to like communicate with people or to come to some understanding, or hell, to move them over to your side. And that's why I came onto the platform in the first place, is I think that a lot of people could have better conversations if they just considered the other side a little bit more, or worded something a little bit better. And I think that rather than like demonize optics or the need for like improved rhetoric, I think that like you just need to realize what your goal is. And if your goal is to talk to people and convince them or have a good conversation, then that's that's a necessary part of that, is like making whatever you're saying palatable to the person across the table. And that's going to change depending on who it is. If you're talking to a clone of yourself, you can make whatever yikesy jokes you want, right? Because the clone of you like knows what you mean by it. But like, we're rarely ever talking to a clone of us. And so there's always some level of like wrapping it up in a way that's meant for that person, or in a way that they'll understand it, because the whole point is for them to understand it. And if we're not like careful to the palate of like who we're serving food to, then why are we serving food to them in the first place? What is the purpose of cooking the food? It's for them to enjoy it. So you got to cook it the way that they want it, right?
No, I think that's a really good point. Really good point. And that's something that I've been working on. It's a long process, trust me. What is it? When Paul in the Bible became a Christian, it took him 13 years of disappearing to reevaluate his life. It takes a long time to work on these things that are so integral to us. Like, yeah, I'm just going to be a straight shooter versus what is the actual objective here? Is the objective for them to understand, or is the objective to get good video content? And it's a hard balance in this world in media. It sucks because there's absolutely so many external pressures to push for not to have understanding.
Yeah. And like, kind of speaking to objectives, when you made this return video, was any part of your objective to get the people that are criticizing you to understand you better, or to buy into like this new and improved approach? Because I would have to imagine that you did, right?
Of course, yeah. And you know what, that's also part of the reason I came to Twitch, because I love that I have supporters that love my perspectives on the world. But guys, like, my content, you've seen it all. You've seen, I can't watch conservative content anymore because I can literally complete their sentences in my head. I only watch left-wing content now because I know all the conservative arguments, and so do you guys and my conservative followers. It feels good to know that you're not alone in the world, absolutely. But my content now is in the large part for leftists because I want to talk to them. I want to bridge that divide. And it's something that I constantly have an internal struggle with. I live in the tension there, as in I see how leftists respond, and it's so insane sometimes, so vile. Like, I'm not even going to watch your explanation. And I just am like, you know what? I'm just gonna leave it. You can sink in the boat. I don't care anymore. No, and then I'm like, no. That is not why you're doing this. You need to talk to these people. They're human beings too. You want to treat them the way you want to be treated. They've got good observations of the world in some cases. In fact, they acknowledge a lot of the same problems you do. And you just, you got to go through those logical steps with them. And I'm working on that. But I'm a human being. Like, if you expect me not to be flawed, and if people expect me not to mess up in that regard in my goals and objectives, like, you're kidding yourself.
Yeah. And I'll take this opportunity to speak to the audience a little bit that are listening on my side that I'm concerned with. Like, I don't trust that, like, you're going to be good at this. Like, I know you're going to be bad at it because you spent a lot of time being a contrarian ever since you were a little girl, and in like saying yikesy shit and in being a freaking troll. And unfortunately, there are consequences to that people feel or people perceive, where like some of your takes on immigration in the past are things that are going to like hurt immigrants, or they're going to encourage people in other countries to support policies that are going to hurt these people. And so I think they have reason to be upset that you were talking about really serious issues and being contrarian and being yikesy and being jokey about them, because the people that are privy to that side of things that are hooking on to them and then implementing policy are like legitimately hurting people. And so like, I'm happy to hear that you're doing this, but like, me and whoever else like looked at your other stuff, it's going to take a while for us to believe in that. And I think part of that is going to be like being better optically and demonstrating this. So if that's ever something that you're open to like input on, I review videos all the time. So if you want me to review some...
Have you watched, because I find a lot of people who have a problem with me, and I get this is just a problem with the internet in general, and I do it too. They'll watch a single video or interview I did 6 years ago and be like, that is Lauren now. And of course they can't see in one, they'll watch that video and then they'll watch me now and be like, this is the same person. And they don't see the 6 years of growth. So let me ask you, like, have you seen my most recent content that I did right before I took a break on immigration?
No, I don't think so. What was the title?
And that, like, changing my mind on immigration. Did that 3 years ago. That title. And I'll tell you right now, 99% of the people criticizing me haven't seen that video either.
whose fault do you think that is, as like a promoter of the content and stuff, and as the only marketer?
I shared it on everything. I mention it when people bring up immigration. So that's the question. If I put out 2 videos, one that I put out 6 years ago where I had a certain perspective, and then I put out another video saying I've changed my mind on this perspective and I've shared it on all my platforms, do you still think I'm at fault for people not seeing that?
So I think that the expectation is that you do even more than that, as unfortunate as that is, because it's not that you did like one video that was good and one video that was bad. It was that like the bulk of your opinions and your content and anywhere you go where you were talking about these things is like really, really negative about immigration. So you're setting up this kind, like you're building a bunch of kindling in a field and you're keeping all this dried grass out there, never cleaning it up. And all it's going to take is one of those kinds of videos and the whole thing goes up because you've set it up to be that way. So I think the only way that you can...
You're wrong. It's because you don't know me well enough. You don't, and you haven't watched my content enough. So you just don't know. And someone in the chat just made a point. They were like, it's not her fault if they refuse to watch it. And it genuinely is a problem of refusing to watch in many cases. I know because I deal with this every day. Someone making an accusation of me, I send them the link to the video, and every time it's useless. I'll even DM these people sometimes and be like, here, watch this, please. And they tell me, fuck off. So you want to know what I spent the most money on? And I don't really make money on my documentaries. They tend to be a black hole of throwing money into.
Well, I actually want to go back to that. Do you really not think that like the body of your content was creating an environment where all it took was really one yikers thing for people to put the pieces together and to think negatively of you? Do you not think there's any merit in considering that?
I mean, like, you'd have to point to specific videos. I don't think you could say all of your videos are yikes when I have videos that are like talking about, you know, I have videos just talking about basic relationships of how to make girlfriends, you know? So you'd have to talk about specific videos.
Your ones on immigrants or migration.
When you propose it in that way, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to be able to disavow everything I've ever said in the past. You'd have to give me specific points that I would have to go through. And I hate it when people propose it that way. Like, are you going to disavow your whole past? Because I can't do that because I know it's a complex layer.
Let's pause. Because that's not at all what I'm saying.
You're right.
I'm saying
that's
like,
not what you're saying.
You put out a lot of videos where you were constantly giving takes on immigrants and on migration. And all of those set the foundation for you having one video that's really, really bad. And then people putting these pieces together as to who you are as a person. And it won't matter how many like little cups of water you throw on. You can't compare the volume of a cup of water to the ember that started that. You need to look at all the other...
That's what I was about to address.
Okay, go ahead.
That's what I was like in the middle of that when I was saying the project that I've spent the most money on out of anything I've ever done and the most time on, risked my life on, genuinely almost spent 5 years in Turkish prison making it, was my documentary Borderless on immigration, of which the conclusion is that immigrants are a victim of a horrible, corrupt system, and of which I lost a ton of alt-right subscribers who told me I cucked out for immigrants, when my conclusion was actually that there are a lot of Europeans, whether they be ethnic Europeans or not, people who live in Europe, that have suffered as a result of mass immigration, as well as immigrants, and particularly illegal migrants that are suffering as a result of illegal trafficking, getting coaxed into coming to Europe on a false promise by traffickers who are saying they're going to live up the high life, and then they end up sleeping under bridges in France because they didn't go through the proper migration process. They threw out their passports on the advice of traffickers. They can't speak the language. They can't get a job, and their lives are destroyed. I spoke to some of these people who were like, I want nothing more than to go back to my home country because I was sold a lie, and it's horrific. These are human beings. They just want to live. I would probably do the same thing in their circumstances that they did if I were told, hey, you can go to Europe and you can become a soccer star. You can live in a beautiful house, and Europeans, they just have everything. It was so fucking sad, man. I was in Morocco, and there were a bunch of men that had been living up in the mountains there, like off nothing for some of them years, trying to get on boats over to Spain. And they were telling me about how they were going to become rap stars and soccer players. And I'm like, fuck, these people are going to be living under a bridge when they get there. And they don't know this, and they've sacrificed everything. And I think they're absolutely victims of this system as well. And there are, you know, I've never been opposed to just migration, and I've never said that, but there are aspects of this illegal migration chain that are completely corrupt and ruining lives on all ends. You know, you have to have checks and balances so that extremists don't come in. You have to have checks and balances to ensure people can have a job. When I've gone through the immigration process, you have to prove I'm going to have somewhere to live. I can speak the language. I can have a job. Otherwise, you're setting someone up for failure. So like that was the project I spent the most money on, which was very humanizing of migrants. But the thing is, none of my critics watch it. And that was 3 years ago. So to be like, Lauren's had this sudden change, like, no, I've slowly changed my views with information and grown in my observations. But if people don't watch it, I mean, Borderless has over 1 million views. It's just not the people that hate me that are watching this, unfortunately. But a lot of people watched that. And I can genuinely say I've probably done fucking more to de-radicalize the far right and to have them see immigrants as human than any of these leftists who just scream at them and say they're all fascists and Nazis for having legitimate concerns about illegal immigration, terrorism, and problems that it causes.
When you set it up like that, yes, because doing that's not going to convince the people that are on the anti-immigration side. And I think what you're learning as well is that you can't turn the tides of this by dumping a bunch of money and time into a single documentary, because that didn't work out either. So with the understanding
What do you mean that didn't work out?
You just said that wasn't able to turn the tides, that people still believe these things about you.
It changed a lot of people. I'm not making this documentary to make people not think that I'm a fascist. I'm making it because it's what was actually happening on the ground.
To communicate.
Got educated on that.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed the documentary and changed their perspectives.
But your entire point in bringing that up was in response to me about like kind of trying to turn this tide, which is why I'm focusing on that, is like...
Oh, no. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it didn't accomplish that. And you're even saying with the farther alt-right people, it wasn't enough to convince them. Instead, they said that you were cucking out for the other side and yada, yada. So
some of them.
Yeah, some of them.
Enough for you to notice. People who want to listen. I am trying to portray my views in a reasonable, palatable way for people. I am trying my best. But at the end of the day, if someone doesn't want to listen to you, they're not going to. So I can do everything I want to. And if someone in the far corners of the alt-right wants to be like, Lauren, I refuse to see these people as human. They are literally barbarian savages that just want to kill all people. I can say as much as I want, and I'll put it out there. And if they don't want to listen to me, they're not going to listen to me. That goes the same for people that want to just be like, Lauren views all migrants as barbarians and savages that just want to kill white people. If they want to think that, I can say as much as I want, and they're not going to change their mind. The same way that you make videos, and everyone makes videos on the internet, and it still doesn't convince all these people. Like, what do you expect of me as a creator? Do you expect me to change the whole tides of politics for people that don't want to change? I can do what I can, and I can try to be palatable and do my best to portray information accurately. But at the end of the day, I am not there turning these people's necks. I can't force them to believe one thing or the next. And I don't think I should be held responsible for forcing them to do so. Neither should you. Neither should other creators on the platform. Like, hey, ContraPoints, why are there still alt-righters? Why didn't you convince them all to stop being alt-right with your videos? Like, what the fuck? Like, that's a ridiculous standard to hold someone to.
Sure, but that's not what I'm getting at here. So in part, we're talking about, you said a lot of things in the past that were very much so in line with some of the people that you were then unable to convince out of that with this video, with this documentary, right?
No. What thing did I say that you are the most offended by that I've said in my immigration videos in the past? Like, what upset you the most? Like, let's deal with the particular
Can we focus on like this line?
Because I need to know what you keep just talking about a general, like, you said things. What things did I say? Like, I want to address it. I want to, like, let's see particularly what point I put out there that I haven't, worked to change people's minds on. That was a horrific point that has caused a lot of damage in the world. Like, what point is that?
If you don't, if you can't think of any point, then I'll move off of this, because I don't think we're going to make progress on this.
You should. No. You should have to say what, because you can't just speak in these generalities. You did bad thing. You said bad thing. Like, do you know? This is why I get so frustrated talking to people who want to criticize my past, is they actually know fucking nothing about me or my past so often.
I do. I had to do a lot of research before this. They just know Lauren bad. Okay, well then give me a quote, man. A single quote that you think is we're gonna move off about of this. Immigration. That's totally fine.
No, give me a single quote on immigration that I have said that you think contributed badly to the world. I'm not saying that I probably haven't done it, but I want to know if you actually know, or if you're just doing this Lauren bad thing.
No, I do know Lauren. I'm going to stop, because then we will continue with this, and I don't want to argue with you about these things. So I'm going to present criticisms, I'm going to walk as far as I can with you. But the moment we hit a wall like that, I'm going to move off of it because I have tons of other stuff.
Because I am convinced. I hope I'm
it's
wrong.
a wall for me.
I hope I'm wrong, but you said you've done a lot of research on me, so you should be able to. If I'm as bad, or
I've done enough to know how this goes. I've done enough to know how this goes, and that's not where I want to go.
Okay, so what? How does this go?
So we're going to get in a long, heated exchange about some particular quote rather than talking about the broad general thing that I'm trying to bring your attention to. And you won't let me talk about the broad general thing because you want to go into a specific thing that you can defend, that you could fight against, that we're going to get caught up in. And that's not the conversation that I want to have.
But this is the problem is people say Lauren bad, everything she did before, Lauren bad. And then most of the time, that opinion is just derived from the general consensus that I'm bad and not actually anything I've said or done. Can you see the problem there?
I understand that. I know that. I can empathize with that. That's not what I'm trying to do here, and that's not what I'm doing. So if that's where you think I'm going with it, then we don't have to continue on this one.
Well, like people in the audience they're like, okay, like if she's as bad or was as bad as he's saying, like he should be able to give a point. Specific horrific point that she said. And like, can you see how that's really frustrating for me?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to just accept the premise that Lauren's bad for the past 6 years.
If you don't think that you said negative things about immigration,
that I've made.
If you don't think that you've said really negative things about immigration, or you think that I should,
what is the negative thing I said? Or you think, dude, this is not a hard question.
Okay, well, we're gonna move on because we spent a lot of time on this, Lauren.
No, dude, what videos? Okay, what videos have you watched? What of my videos have you watched on immigration in the past?
I'm not going to give you another step in that direction, Lauren. I have to be responsible with you. I didn't want to argue with you. I promised I wouldn't debate you. We've gone too far.
How am I supposed to know? Why would we keep going with you questioning about my life when you're making it appear as though you have done no research on it? Like, why should I let someone do an inquisition on whether I'm a good or a bad person, or I'm approaching the world from a good or a bad way? If
I didn't say good or bad
about my past.
I didn't say good or bad. I said you had negative opinions about immigration. You thought negatively about immigration. So hold on.
I said about immigration.
Hold on,
because you're already starting on a false
now you're
premise.
looping. So Lauren, I have a whole section of this where I have a ton of quotes from 2 of your videos. So if you want to have a conversation where we only work off of quotes, I think this would be a better one to have. So like, I'm trying to be empathetic here. Like if you want that kind of thing, I have that prep. So we could go to that if you want. And that might be more fruitful than the immigrant thing, because I've watched you debate people about this before.
Okay, so can I just at least reframe the premise? I have never disagreed with immigration. And this is already what's pissing me off, is in the past, I know for a fact, I've never disagreed with immigration.
What about illegal immigration?
Absolutely. I've had massive problems with illegal immigration. So if you want to, and I am far from the only one, almost every institution in the world, every government in the world, most people in the world are against illegal immigration. And to portray it as this like, oh my gosh, those horrific views she has, when they're very normal and tend to exist to have a functioning state, like, yes, I have a problem with that portrayal. Like, how dare you say these things? You had negative opinions of illegal immigration in the past. Okay, why is that an inherently bad thing?
I didn't say it was an inherently bad thing. I don't believe that. The way you are portraying
it. The way you are portraying, like, do you feel guilty? I think the chat, I mean, well, maybe I'm getting that wrong, but I do think the way that you're portraying this is an inquisition about comments I've made on illegal immigration in my past being wrong. And so I do need, because I do not to this day believe that criticizing illegal immigration is a bad thing, I do need to understand what those comments were. There are probably things you can point to that I've said in the past that I would disagree with today, but speaking on it on a general level, I'm not going to be able to go and be like, yes, that's bad. I'd have to see specific points that I made, to be like, okay, I've changed my perspective on that, right? Of course. It is difficult to have this on a general, broad conversation.
Yeah, and to be like, to just give my final little parting thing on this before we move to like quoted stuff, which I think you'll enjoy more. Like, remember that when we were talking at the very beginning, you were frustrated with like, I put out this documentary, I put a lot of hard work into this, put a lot of time into this. It said things that like would totally go against what the criticisms of me are, and people didn't watch it. People refused to watch it. It didn't work to change people's perception of me. And
a lot of people did watch it.
Yeah, sure. But that wasn't the point you were making. The point you were making was like, yeah, it's still got 1 million views, but it's not impacting these people who like don't want to listen, or these people who have these negative opinions, right? That's where the conversation was. And that's why I was going to like, well, there were other bits of content you've put out, other things that you've done. And those are the things that people are using to kind of put together the pieces about this thing. And that this one documentary isn't going to be able to put that fire out. But you know, I understand that if I was meant to sit here and go point by point with you, if I was meant to sit here and debate you, if I was to criticize your positions as wrong and I had some alternative to offer, then it would be totally reasonable to expect the quotes and to go back and forth on it. But that's just not the conversation that I want to do with you, because I don't want to argue with you about stuff. So if you don't feel like that's an accurate framing or that's not in line with reality, we can move on to the other stuff.
Okay, so I understand what you're trying to do, and I apologize for trying to drag you into a conversation you didn't want to have, and an approach you didn't want to take or get into. But yeah, that's the problem there is in order to continue having parts of the problem or parts of the conversation you want to have, I have to accept a premise I inherently disagree with. So we can't continue down that route, right?
Yeah. And that was something Stephen mentioned to me. Like, oftentimes it's difficult for you to accept or process the criticisms that are levied against you because people aren't able to provide quotes to you or specific things to you. And where they're starting from is something that is like completely off. Like, you're never going to be able to agree to it because it's something that's not true. It's not supported by facts.
A lot of her detractors legitimately don't give a fuck. Like, their criticisms are oftentimes unfounded, and they really don't care, like, if she's changed positions or not. They just want to destroy her. Like, that's literally the whole goal. So if that's, like, the crowd of people that are criticizing her, and if you look at, like, some of the criticism she started with, so look at, like, how Lance treated their last debate. That was unbelievable. It's not really surprising to me that she doesn't engage with it and, like, oh, well, I'm sure these are good faith criticisms of my beliefs. But she's probably more thinking, like, these guys are just assholes that are super motivated, and I'm going to nitpick the fuck out of every criticism they give, and I'm not going to take much of it very seriously. It wouldn't surprise me. Like, I would expect her to engage with it that way, even if it's not optimal.
This gets back to something we talked at the very beginning, and some advice I would have is, like, you often have to, like, be the bigger person and steelman that. As shitty as that sounds, some of these people don't deserve it, but others might, where you have to, like, look deeper into that, be critical of it, of, like, your own first, like, impression of it, and look deeper as to, like, where is this coming from? What quotes could Booksmarts have been talking about here? Or what videos could Booksmarts be referring to here? Because if you did that, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have, like, had such, like, a big heated exchange too, because you probably would have realized where I was going with it. But you know,
can I address that quickly?
Yeah, sure.
I understand as a public figure that is my responsibility to try to understand people, to try to listen to people, even if they're being unreasonable. But if you do consider that from a slightly different perspective, you have to steelman the gaslighting about you. You know, that would be the most insane advice to give someone in an abusive relationship, for example. You know, their partner is telling them they're evil, they're a piece of shit, and the therapist is like, listen, you have to steelman that. Think about where you could be a piece of shit. Think about where think about where you cheated when they didn't cheat. Like, could you have possibly cheated on your partner? They keep telling you cheated on them. I know you didn't, but could you steelman? Like, that's insanity driving for someone, especially when they deal with it 24/7. And I've seen this happen with Destiny, and you have to understand it's a very human reaction. This is why he, like, just gets pissed off. He's like, these fucking people, they're just like, you guys act like idiots. You know, they call him names, they call him racist, when he's so obviously done so much to combat the far right. Like, one of our biggest debates is him. Quite frankly, he won that debate on immigration with me, right? And he still gets these accusations. And at what point does a creator have to accept the gaslighting for the sake of making the piece? And at what point are they allowed to have a human reaction and be like, a human and a rational reaction and be like, no.
So
no.
we, like, I promise this will be the last thing, because we will keep going back and forth for forever. If somebody's in an abusive relationship, definitely that's not the advice to them, right? If they have somebody in the relationship who is gaslighting them, most certainly not the advice for them. But like you mentioned at the very beginning, if you're a public figure, unfortunately, this is the advice. It is the world we live in. And like you and Destiny have both realized, Destiny in I think it was 2020, he said it'll be the year of rhetoric. That's because he in part because he spoke to me.
Part of the reason why in 2020 I'm trying to pay a lot more attention to my rhetoric, and I'm trying to be more mindful of how things come across, how I sound, is in a large part because of the conversations that we've had.
And I told them, like, this is a reality that you have to kind of understand, and if you really want to connect with people, it's a hurdle that you have to get over. And luckily, it's a hurdle where, like, a huge part of that is like in your court, and there are things that you could work on. Sure, there are people who will refuse to listen, but the people that refuse to listen aren't the people that you can really account for. They're not the people you're trying to convince, because no amount of change on your end is ever going to solve that. But there are people who we can convince, and we want to figure out what that group of people is and how we can change things to be palatable to those people. And so that's where you focus. And every time the focus moves from that group of people that we can reach to like, oh, but the people that never listen, they're so fucking frustrating. Like, yeah, it is, but we cannot focus on that because it'll take the wind out of our sails for like improving everything else. We really have to focus on the people that are like, they're only 5 steps away from like sort of agreeing with us. If we just change the palatability a little bit, then they would like it. And that's usually where I like to focus, because there's more positivity there. Like even in this conversation before I came here, there were people retweeting stuff like you saw that are just going ballistic about it, or that think that like, I'm here to be a part of your retribution tour, or I'm here to make you look super palatable or whatever. And like, that's not what this has been so far. And I would hope that's not what this will become, right? Like they haven't even heard a conversation yet and they're upset about it. And those are the people that I can't be worried about because I can't convince them. But for the people that do watch the conversation, I want them to realize that I hear you and like I see you, and like do what I can to account for the people who will listen long enough to like get it, right? And so it's easy for our view to shift over to those awful people that will never listen, but it's never productive, right?
Okay, so let me just confirm something from you, because with the framing, I kind of assumed when you said, what have you done to alleviate your critics' concerns about you? Of course, when I think of my critics, I think of some of these crazy people. So you're slicing those off, and that's not an aspect of my critics, is what you're saying.
They're not going to be the helpful ones.
Or like that is an aspect. They're not the ones that you're focusing on who I should be talking to.
Like sometimes they can be, right? Sometimes they are pointing us to things that it only takes a little bit of effort to understand where they're coming from, even if they're dumb fucks on the surface sometimes. But yeah, for the most part, no. The people that will refuse to listen to you ever in the future, that's going to be difficult. Now, not always, right? Because imagine if somebody had an audience of people who all refuse to listen to you the way that a lot of lefty communities are now. They coincidentally will have to, because they're watching the Serfs on something, or they're watching Hassan on something, right? So they're still forced to listen. When they're forced to listen, then we need to start considering them. Even if they're people who would not normally consume your content, you still want to be aware of those people and for looking for ins with them, just so you could test it, because you're also not God, and you're not able to predict that they will always be in that state of not listening. So when you have them in a chair in front of you, just try what you can. Like there are people who are assholes who don't like comedy that go to comedy bars just to be upset, but that doesn't mean that like we're not trying to get everybody in the room to laugh or something like that, or focusing on that person and letting it ruin our set. Like we want to get everybody in on it. And you know, I think that when they're sitting in those chairs and they're forced to listen to you, that's when you can try new material and really try to get at them. And eventually you will find something that's convincing, and it'll be completely unintuitive, because before you had tested that thing and saw that it worked, you were under the impression that they were completely unreachable. They weren't worthy of consideration, yada, yada. But it may be that you'll have a conversation with Serfs or somebody else where you're like, oh, weirdly enough, they really listen to me when I say X, Y, or Z. Like maybe that's how I communicate this to people. That's not what would work on me at all. And to get back to the... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, you know what's funny? I've actually thought about this, and I was thinking to myself, because I asked Serfs to do a debate in real life, right? And we're both in the same city, it would be great. And I actually reckon if Serfs and I sat down for a beer at a bar, we would probably agree on a lot. I've noticed this I know that sounds weird to a lot of my audience, but I've had this happen so many times with far leftists, where once the ego element has been taken out of it, the online posturing element of I have to disagree with you, there has to be that tension, you'll actually find you agree on a lot more than you disagree on. But unfortunately, so much of that ego and online posturing aspect makes you focus on the disagreements rather than on the points that you could find common ground. And it's tough. It's tough because I do think there's so much social pressure to have certain opinions in this culture, this society we live in. And how we overcome and navigate those social pressures is incredibly challenging, and those optical pressures is incredibly challenging, which is why I appreciate what you do with your analysis of debates. I find it fantastic, even if we have disagreements here. I find it really interesting because in a way you are trying to bridge that gap between extremes and radicals online and showing, and even just normal debaters online, whoever it may be, bridge that gap and showing them how to communicate better, which you ultimately need, because no one's going to agree on something if they're speaking two different languages and going past each other. No, I do think that's a good thing you do online, but yeah, I still disagree with some of your analysis of me.
Of course.
After all of that.
And like to comment on one little thing that I promise we'll agree. You noted in one of your videos that like you're not able to be one of these people that just says progressive stuff that they don't believe in because they know that it'll get them something.
And I know people that can chant progressive slogans through gritted teeth to keep their jobs or because their agents told them to do it. And it's just not something I can do. I don't see it. It's not genuine.
It's like those are some like keys to the kingdom. Like if I just say this thing, if I just do this thing, I'm able to get the people away from me, get them off of me. I'm able to like appease the horde a little bit. Like I thought with this conversation that if I were to start off by maybe 20% of it, like I told you in DMs, I think like to just start off with like some of the criticisms or some of the bad stuff that's happened, that maybe that will get them off of me. But half measures don't work in that way, right? Like you can't say like, I'm pro BLM, I did all this stuff for it, I put the black thing on my page, but I gotta say that BLM has some, like it doesn't do what you wanted it to do. It only works in the purest form to use those keys. And so yeah, so like where to start with this video. So you were trying to reach some people who were critical of you. How well do you think you did that in this like coming back video? How well do you think you were able to reach those people and speak to them? People that would have been critical of you that would listen through the whole thing?
I honestly, it was hard to gauge an analysis on that because I had been so far removed from the online sphere for a year there. I felt like when I stepped back in, I had stepped into an entirely different world. I was like just flabbergasted by how much the political scene had changed. I do think a lot of people were like, ooh, excited to give me a chance, but they were excited because they thought I had become a leftist and didn't realize that I was still a conservative, just open to hearing other perspectives more and deliberately wanting to hear other perspectives more. Like I say, I really only listen to leftist content anymore because I really want to understand their views. I really do. I'm trying very hard. And if you're someone that's followed me for a long time, you'll see that in my content. But if you aren't someone who's followed me for a long time, I'm still right-wing piece of shit, conservative trash, whatever. And this is what I was thinking when you said half measures. You were like, half measures won't cut it. And I know that. And I also, that's part of the reason that I will never do this big apology tour, because I know that they don't actually want me to apologize for, oh, you did X, Y, Z. They actually want to apologize for me being a conservative. If I come out and I say I apologize for one quote I said in a video, but I still have a lot of problems with illegal immigration, they're going to be like, well, what the F was that apology for? You're still a Nazi, because they inherently believe that is still an extremist view. In a lot of cases, not everyone. I think there are some people that are more reasonable. That's why I talk to Destiny. I think he's really reasonable, and I really respect his analysis of politics because it's very truth-based. And a lot of people wonder, they're like, why does he talk to Lauren? Why does he give her a chance? We disagree on a lot. We do, Destiny and I. But I think he is willing to talk to me because he's experienced what I've experienced with so many people lying about him. And it's really difficult to understand that dichotomy and really difficult to, you know, I think there's a level of understanding there of having so many people lie about you and having to address false claims and not really having to get to a point where you don't give a shit anymore. So I said a lot there. I literally completely forgot the initial point we were talking about.
You're totally fine, because we're moving on to the next thing anyways. In like, oh man. So like, remember before how we were talking about how like the people that won't listen or the people that are like hard stuck, we can't focus on them for our strategy, right? We have to focus on the people that are at least willing to watch the full video, or these reasonable people that you're talking about that are more of like the Destiny-esque approach to things. They're going to hear you out. I think like this is another instance of like, when you're talking about those other people, the people criticizing me, it's very easy to characterize them all as the people with the worst aspect of that, where they don't want to listen to you, they're not fucking hearing it, whatever. But there's a huge group of those people that dislike you that like will listen to you. And I actually think that like that's probably a bigger group. Most people just have like a passing belief about you because they've only like seen an audio clip or something. And often for those people who make up like a huge number of these people, granted they're not the people in your DMs harassing you and stuff, those are the crazies. I think there's still a huge group of people that have something on a second monitor that'll just be like, oh, Lauren Southern's come around, she's sounding a lot more reasonable nowadays, right? And those are the people you probably want to focus on, and they definitely do exist. And I think that like this video in particular could have been made in a way that better got at those people, even if it came at the cost of like reaching the people who are already on your side. Like little decisions, like when in the video you mentioned the toxicity of online communities, and you're talking very broadly about this and how it's a both sides thing. The visual elements were all like CNN, MSNBC, people on Twitter that are like talking negatively about conservative people. There was one version of both, one version of a news channel and one version of a tweet that was like a version of Republican people or conservative people being that way. But if the video was meant to be directed at people who are not already believing you or who are not already on your side, these are the kinds of decisions where like, oh, we could have included different kinds of screen grabs to show that like you better understand where this is coming from on both sides. And that could have easily been a way to reach more of the people that, you know, you're trying to, right? The people that are on the other side.
Oh, trust me, I know it's a problem on both sides at a far deeper level than most people ever will. But yeah, I guess, you know, that's something that I'm not thinking. That's a problem with the way that I think and I approach things. Is I really just, in general, my approach to things isn't like, how am I going to psychologically manipulate these people or to make them more on side with me. I really just try to say things how I see them. And like I said, I know that's a problem, and I know I have to try to be palatable to people with how I present things, but I have trouble with it. I have trouble with it. I'll just be real. I want to say things how I see them. And that's my biggest problem, absolutely, with trying to engage with leftists. And you know what? Here's a give I'll say is there's probably a lot of leftists that feel that way as well, and that's why the two of us can't communicate, because they won't give me any wiggle room to be like, okay, come on, man, what do we agree with on here? It's a tough. All I can say to that is it's a tough thing to overcome, and it's probably going to take me a lot of time. I'm not going to stop telling the truth. I'm not going to stop being a conservative at any point. I've had this, unless I'm like completely proven wrong and completely have my mind changed on all these issues, at which point I'm going to follow what I believe is truthful. And even if that were fucking communism, I would do that. I just don't think I would ever be convinced to be a communist, and I don't think I would ever see those views as useful or productive.
Tough to guess. You never know.
Okay, I have gone through the whole mental process of thinking about what it would look like if I became a leftist, right? I know I could never do that artificially. I know people who have done it artificially that I talk to this day. And it's not an easy life to live. At the end of the day, you have to, you know, I have to live with myself. I have to live with my soul. I can't say things I don't believe in. I'm just not capable of it. And that has screwed me over in a lot of ways in my life. That has really put me in tough positions. Mm-hmm. But I can't fucking do it. I can't say things I don't believe in. And I've thought about if I were to become a lefty, and I think I'd make a very good lefty. I think I would do a good job. I thought about how I would portray myself, all these different things, just as a fun thought experiment. And I think, and doing that as well helps me understand leftists a little more and where they're coming from. And those are little thought experiments I do. But a lot of the criticisms you have of me and my approach are things that I have personally thought about a lot, but it's a tension. It's difficult to address these problems. And I've kind of decided at the end of the day, one of the best approaches is just talking about my views in action. Because I've seen so many people that try to do this switcheroo where they say, I apologize for everything I've said. And even in that video I did, where I was ambiguous with where I stood, if you do these apologies and you don't actually get deeply into your views and show you articulating them in debates and off the cuff and how you really feel, people will just be disappointed. I don't think this is my views, XYZ, I apologize for XYZ, actually does anything. It's just one comment. It could be completely fake. It could be just made up to make sure you don't, lose your platform or something. So I would like to think that people watching me in action, talking about my views, making new videos about them, having debates, that's how I want to do it.
Yeah.
That's how I want to do it.
No, like, so again, we've pointed out something that we know for sure won't work. So just saying, oh, I'm sorry, I don't believe in this stuff anymore, that's not going to work. But there is room in between, right? Like little things, like I said, with the having a montage. Like, one of the things you're trying to communicate to me right now, I've spent a lot of time watching more lefty people, and I'm going to continue to spend more time watching lefty people because I want to understand that side of things. You could have demonstrated that way better if in your video you had included like snippets from both sides, because what lefty people talk a lot about are the problems that conservative people have or conservative media has. So to have a complete absence of that communicates the opposite to people. And so it's little things like this that I think that you could change to get better at communicating the actual hard work that you're putting in behind the scenes, and to have a payoff for that, and to begin to actually change people's minds. I think focusing on things that you know are not going to work isn't going to get you there. And you have to focus on, like, where has it worked? What are good apology videos? Or like, what are these tours that actually work? Because a lot of people have certainly had that. And like, you know, I think looking at other success stories or looking at other ways that you could get better at communicating to those folks and really having them in mind when you're creating stuff, rather than, I want to say what I want to say, right? Like, getting away from that habit of saying what you want to say in exactly the way you want to say it. And like, how can I word this in a way where you're going to understand me? What are the terms that you understand? What are the things that you're sympathetic to? And how can I wrap this up in that to get you to see where I'm coming from? I think that's going to be like the move for you moving forward. And this video presents tons and tons of opportunities like that. This is just one small piece, but like all throughout here, if you meant to speak to that audience, it almost feels like you're not considering them in that video. And that's why that video, in my opinion, didn't change a lot of the minds of even reasonable people behind the scenes who I know watched the entire thing, because it's not doing the things that they were expecting it to do. And those expectations would have been things that, like, I think you could have understood by looking at past successes or by listening to the people who are criticizing you that are actually reasonable. But because I keep hearing about the unreasonable people that criticize you, I have an assumption, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know how many people you talked to who had criticisms of you that you felt were reasonable. Like, did you do a lot of that before releasing the video?
I feel like a lot of the things that or people in general, what you're articulating, people have an issue with me. What they are asking of me is too much. And you know why? Because I am incapable of playing a game. I'm incapable of apologizing for things I don't feel bad about. I'm incapable of...
Let's pause.
Maybe,
let's pause. Let's really pause. Yeah. Can we start with the answer so that I know if you were talking to reasonable people with reasonable expectations of you? Because we're already starting with like unreasonable expectations of you again.
Okay, so people with reasonable criticisms of me. Okay, so I have watched videos, and it's been a while. Like, I've watched video critiques of me from leftists of old videos I've made, and I've cringed because I've been like, oh my gosh, I got this fact wrong or that fact wrong, and they're totally right there, and holy shit, I need to totally reanalyze my approach. But to me, I don't really... To me, doing the right thing is making a new video and proposing my new beliefs and my new views. And I'm trying to... Okay, so for example, here's a big video I made a while ago on marriage. I was getting really annoyed with a lot of people, assuming when I talked about traditional marriage that they thought I was suggesting you have to get married right away at like 19 years old, otherwise you're like a degenerate. So I made a big video saying like, no, please wait for the right person. Please do like proper analysis. Promotion of conservative traditionalism doesn't mean get married this second to the first person you meet. Like, this is an absurd idea. And making a video like that instead of... I just don't think I could honestly make a video that was like apologizing for me not giving enough context here and there, because I don't like apology videos. I don't really feel bad for growing in my beliefs. I think lots of young people go through these problems in their head with politics. Where do I stand? You know, you're blind in a room and you're touching the walls of some extremes to try to figure out where you are and orientate yourself. And I don't really think people should have to apologize for that political journey so long as
You don't think that, but we're not talking about what you want. Remember, what you want's very different.
Like I said, I can't do something just for other people. I have to really believe it myself. So what you're asking may be entirely reasonable. It may be the proper approach that I should take, but I have difficulty overcoming. The only difference between me and a lot of people's political journeys is that I had mine in the public eye from when I was a teenager. So when I look at other people that are like shitting on me, Lauren, you have to do this, you have to do that, and I know they were in my DMs 4 years ago, like spewing crazy, like far right stuff that I've ever even said, and they're like, oh, but I'm different because, you know, actually, you know, to me, I do not feel that going through a political evolving online is something I should apologize for.
You don't
I
think
just
you
don't
should.
feel like that. And you're right. Maybe it is something that a lot of other people feel. Maybe that is the case. But I can't do things just for other people. I can't. Maybe that's something that's maybe that's something I need to learn to do, but I can't. I can't do it.
Was this video just meant to be self-serving? Because my understanding was it was for those people, right? And if we want to build it for those people,
those are my honest beliefs. Those are my honest beliefs, though.
But remember,
I can make that video then, because my honest beliefs are.
You can give your honest beliefs.
I want to,
and you can make them rhetorically sound for people that they're meant for. Both of these can happen at the same time. I think there's some give on the ideal way that you want to word them, and obviously there's going to be, because the ideal way you want to do things, as we've learned, like does not mesh well with everybody all the time. And
you're not wrong. But does rhetorically sound to you involve saying things I don't believe is the question?
No. And that's why I asked, like, who have you talked to in your life that you feel is reasonable in their criticisms? And I can't, like, it sounds like we don't have a lot of those. Destiny is becoming one of them that I think you're trusting a lot more.
He is one of the few people that if he makes a criticism of me, I will honestly listen to it. In the political sphere anyways, I have family and friends, obviously, that I talk to all the time, but they're not in it with this world all the time. So if Destiny makes a criticism of me, I will know that he has probably actually looked into the information. There's a reason when people say Lauren shot immigrants with flares, Destiny won't be like, yeah, why did you do this? Because he actually cares about the factual information. So his critique I would take quite seriously.
Yeah.
And earnestly. Yeah.
It's just that, like, when I reach behind the scenes, I find reasonable people not saying that you shot flares at boats. I find people that say, oh man, hold on, I won't give examples because I don't want us to get into a back and forth on that.
Like the stream.
Specific.
Do you know Counterpoints?
Yeah, I like him.
His name's Connor. Yeah, so I appreciate his critiques of me. We have lots of conversations behind the scenes about rhetoric, and he is always like, Lauren, he says a lot of the things you do. He's like, you need to stop being a fucking troll. You need to not just piss people. We talk about this all the time. So I do have reasonable people that I talk to, and there's back and forth there, disagreements, agreements. But what you find reasonable in criticisms of me and what I find reasonable are going to be different as well. There are people I can respect and people that I can listen to. That doesn't mean I'm going to 100% accept their analysis without pushback. I don't think they'd respect me if I did that.
Right. And that's, to be clear, not what I'm asking. I just think you need to accumulate more of those people and then take the sum total of what they're saying. Because the other thing is, once you get a critical mass of those people that you trust and they're all saying one thing, even if you disagree with it, you have to invite this like extra sort of like step of, okay, 80% of the people that I trust, that I respect, are telling me that I fucked up here. Like, maybe I fucked up here. And if I did fuck up here, assuming that's true, what are the next steps from there? What do I have to do to rectify that wrong? And if you're fine with whatever the rectification is of that wrong, like you're like, oh, that's easy, I could do that. Like just correct like a stat in a video. Like, I'm okay with that. I don't think I was wrong here, but if all it takes to be right is to correct the stat, I'm willing to compromise on that, right? There is compromise you can find once you talk to those people.
So this is interesting, because I think behind the scenes, people that actually know me and have watched a lot of my content that are more on the left, like I have a lot of friends that are leftists that are just like, please don't say publicly, like, and I get it, I completely get it. When they actually look into my video, they're like, you actually. So for example, Counterpoints, he's very reasonable. Would you agree?
Yeah.
very reasonable guy. So he watched through all of my Great Replacement video, which is probably like one of my most controversial things online, right? And then he watched Sean Vid's criticism of it, and he was like, you know, your video is actually quite mild, the things you said in it. It's really the public association and some of the optical things about it that made everyone freak out about it, because the comments that are made in that actual video are, here's like the Pew Research on immigration data. Some of the data may be a bit off, but you know, that happens in videos, and you're happy to address that. But the overall point is actually not that different from mainstream media assertions of mass immigration, demographic changes, all these things. And the assertion at the end, there was no assertion of a giant conspiracy or we need to get rid of brown people or anything like that. The assertion at the end is, should we consider the aspects that this could, and the impacts that this could have on culture? And Counterpoints was like, okay, so I think you took a bad optical approach, and because of that, people have completely misunderstood the video, and part of that is your fault, Lauren. I think we should do a breakdown and analysis of this video today to do exactly what you've basically said, is, you know, break down what is correct in that, what is incorrect, and go through it today in a modern context with someone like Counterpoints, who is very I'd say reasonably critical of me and would have questions for me. So we actually plan on doing that stream in like 2 weeks. We're just planning it out right now.
And that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Just look for that. Or like, even better, find somebody who doesn't come away with the same opinion that Connor had, but is still somebody that you respect. Like if somebody else says, yeah, optically it's bad, I would agree with Counterpoints. But at the same time, like for me, listening to you talk about it in hindsight, about how all I did was Google it, search for this. I didn't know that this guy was associated with this and did this. Like, oh, well, that's a huge problem that people would focus on. And I know that you don't care about it, but like other people that I have talked to in the background most certainly do. And it's the same with this boat thing. You're focusing on like the dumbest criticism of it that is obviously false, because that's easy to like, well, of course they're saying something that didn't happen.
Criticize me. That's what people's main criticism is. They're the main one. I know, because I see it every day, and I see it from big creators, not just like random 0 follower crazies, right? I have gotten that criticism from reporters at MSNBC, right? It's not like a small random crazy thing. It's the main criticism, and it's false. So of course, you know, if I don't reactively reject that premise, then you know, I'm going to be spending the whole time arguing on something that's false. I have to reject it before the conversation can continue.
You can, but you have to pair that with other stuff. You have to pair that with other concessions that are going to get the people that will listen to you onto your side. So you can say like, first of all, I want to get this out of the way. I didn't shoot a fucking flare at a boat. Don't say I shot a flare at the boat. You can say X thing that was bad that I did, and I see where you're coming from on that. You can say Y thing that was bad that I did. I do see that. I do see where you're coming from. You can say Z thing that I said that I did, that I did that was bad. I totally agree. But don't say that I fucking shot a flare at a boat, because it's on video. You can see that that's not the truth, and I'm sick of hearing it, right? Like, there's a balance to things. And I think that working towards that balance is going to be rhetorically beneficial for you, and it's going to keep people listening, because they might go, oh, she's not being crazy about it. I mean, she knows that she fucked up in this way and this way and that way. And I definitely think that. And I guess I was wrong. She didn't really shoot flares onto a boat, but she did do these other things, and I don't like those other things. And at least she knows that. I'm going to keep listening, right? And then you keep them hooked, and then you get to like work through everything, right? It's give and take. You get to correct misinformation while also, and this is beneficial to you too, like getting people to like confronting the real criticism and people that aren't fucking crazy, right?
But in a lot of cases, even the reasonable lefties, their problem with me is something that I'm not going to be able to apologize for, because they think the problem inherently, like, fuck all the context with the boat and shit. They think the problem is that I'm against illegal immigration, and I still am. Like, I don't think those boats should be going through the Mediterranean. I think that people are drowning because of that, and they should probably have a policy similar to Australia, where they're like, no, you go through the proper refugee migrant process. Otherwise, we get increased drownings, illegal trafficking. We don't know who the people coming in are.
People drown if you don't rescue them when they fucking... I know. I don't want to get into this argument with you, Lauren.
Okay, well, I really think people should look into the data on that, because there is a pull factor. And this is why Australia put the 0 boats allowed in policy, because their drownings went down to 0 when there is no more pull factor for traffickers. So there is a pull factor there. But there's ways... You can consider, and you can... Yeah.
You could have
Well, sure, there's
advocated
maybe
for
different
that
ways.
while like not stopping the boat that's going to save people from drowning, right? Like if your thing is you don't want them to drown, it like
That's
it doesn't
a complex
start.
question too.
Yeah.
See, that's the problem. These are all complex because was it a boat that was going to save people? Maritime laws are that if anyone is near a boat that is drowning, any ships out in the Mediterranean, you have to go and save them, NGO or not. You have to go and help them. And then when you follow maritime law, you have to take them to the closest port of safety. So why the Aquarius was under investigation and why it was ultimately shut down and impounded for illegal actions is, first of all, they were under investigation by the Italians for going on the coast and working as a trafficking service, not a rescue service. So instead of bringing them to the closest port in Libya and Morocco, they were accused of bringing them to Spain, which is clearly what was happening, or Spain or Italy. And then also the whole ship and operation was just operating illegally, which is why it was shut down. They were dropping toxic waste in the Mediterranean. I think it had like HIV on it. I think it was like tons of it, 10 tons of it. It was crazy.
10 tons of HIV.
So these were
that's crazy.
HIV infected like clothing and stuff. They
I'm
were
messing
dumping it
with
into. You can look this up. This is all 10 tons of HIV. They were dropping into the ocean. I tell you.
Awful. These fucking liberals.
But yeah,
dude.
so it's like it's a really complex issue that wasn't even okay. So I think that the criticism there, like people could approach it from so you've got these political views. The state is already investigating this boat. It's already taking the process to put into effect an investigation and arrest it for its illegal behavior. Do you partake in vigilante actions then? Should you, as a political activist, partake in vigilante actions when you don't feel the state is fulfilling the role that it should and the laws that it should put in place? That, I think, is a very interesting question compared to you shot flares at a boat.
One that you tried to debate on that most recent panel that I watched of yours, right, about vigilante justice. But to transition off of this, because again, I don't want to argue with you about the immigration stuff.
I'm just. Can you accept that? That may be a better framing.
It's a much better framing, right? But it's not a video of you on a boat stopping people from rescuing, drowning, and like the way that it can optically be perceived with the video.
You're portraying it, yes.
Right,
but
the way it can be perceived.
It ignores so much of the context.
Yes,
and the context is important. It is,
and you let people do that.
Yes or no answer.
Right, and we want to learn how to like not give people those footholds to have those negative perceptions. And one of those would have probably not been to go out on the boat and do it in that way and film it in that way. Right, like this is what I mean by making optical decisions. Like you can believe in that thing, and I think there's better ways you could advocate for the problems that you're seeing. It's just sometimes you take like a really optically bad strategy, and you're going to get in trouble. Like Counterpoints was telling you, right? Now,
do you think that I have a question for you really quick, because and it's not an aggressive question.
Okay.
I'm very curious, to what degree can people have conviction and not just be like milquetoast, trying to appeal to everyone and not allow for any footholds to the other side to accuse them of saying things they don't believe? Like, what is that balance between giving footholds and having conviction? Because, if you have too much conviction, you're probably going to give a lot of footholds to the other side. But then if you have no conviction, then what the fuck are you doing?
Right. You find in the space in between and you explore that more and more, and then you compare that with what you get out of it, right? There's being too milquetoast and just like flowery and never saying anything that upsets anybody. Then there's being too fucking harsh and being too fucking honest and doing things that are obviously going to be bad for both you and your cause. And somewhere in betwixt those is where you want to find yourself. But definitely getting away from this side where you've been for a while, that is going to be what you're working on. But I don't think, knowing just what I know about you from this conversation and watching a bunch of your debates, I don't think you're ever going to get to the milquetoast side. So it's probably never worth worrying about. I don't think you're ever going to end up there.
Thanks. That's good to know.
Yeah. So I think worrying about the other half of moving between like brutal honesty where you're going to get in trouble and like, in the middle where you can make your ideas more palatable, that's where to focus. I don't think you'll ever get that far, to be honest.
Okay. I've got another question for you then. And this is a big one. So let's say that I take your advice and I'm like, all right, I got to really work to be more palatable. I got to really work to try to, and guys, I am really trying right now, and I'm sorry that really trying is like, what the fuck are you doing, Nazi queen? But right now I am really trying to understand lefties and speak in a way where I'm accurately portraying my beliefs so that they aren't misinterpreted. And that is my responsibility to a degree. It is. And I'm working on that. But let's say that I was so good at employing the tactics you are recommending to be rhetorically effective and get across what I mean effectively to people who disagree with me. Won't they just say I am mask on?
Yeah, we see this problem with some creators in this space, one of which man, can I just name drop? I mean, like, there are definitely creators like I think Vosh is somebody that often gets this criticism word for word, that he has a mask on when he's in conversations with people where he doesn't want to come off bad to an audience that is going to perceive him poorly, right? Like, there are definitely creators that hit this point where they're getting dangerous with it and people start to pick up on it, and then they're dishonest and people are not going to listen to them for this reason or that reason. But at the same time, you've suffered the same consequence at the other end. When you're so honest that you trigger the BS meter of somebody, or that you like go past where they can humanly give you compassion and empathy and whatever, you hit these, like, you know, litmus tests for them, then they stop listening too. So you hit the same problem on both the ends. But because we're way closer to this end, I think we just have to worry about getting that middle ground. And I don't think you'll overextend and go the other way. And if you do, people will tell you. And then all of a sudden, the crazies that just disregard everything that you say, they're striking a different tune. It's not your beliefs. It's like a lack of truth in your beliefs. It's like, you know what? This lady just says whatever just to like get past people. I don't fucking like that, right? And you'll start to pick up on that. And that's why I think even listening to the crazy people can be helpful. Do the crazy people hate me because I'm being too fucking honest and brutal in my ideas and I'm not being compassionate? Or do the crazy people hate me because they can never trust anything I say because they think that I mask on all the time and that I'm not like being truthful? And like in both these cases, they can start to point you in the direction of where you need to move. Like, I need to start being more truthful. I guess that means taking positions that are going to be like optically not sound for me, right? Like, bite the bullet, be wrong, stuff like that. The solutions are totally different for somebody over there. And yeah, so I think those are problems that are similar on both sides of that. Does that answer, or did I?
I mean, that's fair. You gotta, yeah, I don't think you were asserting this, but, you know, will the crazies hate me on one side or the other? Obviously, I don't think we should allow the crazies to dictate where we are and what we believe and what we perceive. But yeah, I think living in the tension is absolutely something that I believe we need to do in most aspects of our life. There's never going to be this yes or no, black and white answer, and a lot of people want that, but sucks to suck, that just isn't there. Yep. Was there any other, you know, we've got about 25 minutes left of the conversation. Is there any other big things that you wanted to hit on or chat about?
Yeah.
Or grill me on? I feel like I'm in trouble at the principal's office. And I'm like, ugh.
Everybody that gets
just write lines.
Everybody.
White people bad. I'll write 10,000 pages.
When I talk with people, it's often like that because I do the rhetorical stuff and I'm like, you can do better. And like, I believe in you. And there's some people I really hate that say shit that like, oh, you shouldn't give her rhetorical advice. You're going to help her fucking impregnate people with bad ideas or something. Like, no, I'm going to help her not like be completely ostracized from the other side of the ideas. If you think your ideas are palatable on the other side of things, the better that she's able to communicate and listen and everything else, the better she's going to be able to mellow the fuck out. Because I really do think the more that you talk to lefty people and you're charitable to them, the more you'll mellow the fuck out on your points, because you'll start to understand where the other side is coming from, and you'll see like, oh, okay, so like you believe that, I believe this. If I could Thanos snap like either one, maybe I'm picking different sides for different issues, and because of that I'm starting to understand that I'm going to be limited by like practically what's possible in different countries, and an in-between is going to be where I fall instead of like on either ideological like, you know, I think you're going to move, you know, whether you want to or not, more the more that you talk to those people and the more that they become trusted folks that you go to for that, and the more that you understand them. So if I had something else,
something there,
yeah,
sorry, before you move on, I do find it very funny that there is this like massive perception on Twitter, definitely like DGG or Destiny's subreddit and just Twitch sphere in general, where they're like, Lauren is trying to secretly get her claws into Twitch to try and move everyone to right wing. And that's, I mean, I joke about it online where I'm like, I've breached the gates, I've entered Twitch, but really I just want people to consider the points I'm making from a factual perspective. Whereas I've noticed from all the other people who talk to me, they all talk to me like, I can fix her. I can make her more left-wing. I can draw her to... And it's like actually projection on a lot of the Twitch spheres, from a lot of the Twitchers that are talking about me. They all want to drag me to be more like them, whereas I'm like, let's just talk about the facts. Maybe I will. Maybe you'll convince me. Maybe you'll say something that I find really compelling. I will change beliefs. But I am not coming in here for that purpose to say, all of you people, you need to become more like me. I want to present interesting facts and ideas to counter narratives I believe are false. But if you don't want to become right wing, I don't give a shit.
And
That's
like,
fine.
I'll jump on the spike here, because like, this is something I made the mistake of slipping on rhetorically when I was talking to Destiny, is I was like, I'd like to like build some rapport with Lauren, or at least like communicate to her that I'm not one of the crazy people that's just like judging her in really stupid ways or saying things that is just like flat out misinformation, because I want to be the one of the people that could like convince her of some of these points. He's like, be careful with that. It's not convincing her of these points. If you want to say something like that, I think the better way to say it is like to be a better advocate for the other side, or to show her like those points in a way that's like palatable to her. And like whether she accepts it or not is outside of my control, and it's not exactly my goal, but like to get you to understand these things in a charitable way, to where you can like have some understanding of why people arrive at those conclusions, and then you can offer yours to me if you still think they're better, and I can be like, oh, okay, so people are like invested in conservative ideas for this reason and this reason. I can understand that, and then I get to chew on that and think about how I can better convince those people, or if I need to move my position, right? Like, and this is what I love about optics and about considering rhetoric, is I think it has a necessary like effect on your ideas as well, because the more that you need to be more palatable to the other side, or understand them and listen better, which is the other half of it, like the more close to truth you'll fall, because in doing so you'll be like, no dude, you can't fucking say that because it's fucking crazy. I remember being there where you think you could just like do this and this and it's going to work out that way, but that's not how it is. And if you listen to the people on the other side, you'll figure out it's not how they're saying it either, but like there's a place in between. And as you explore that and test that more, your ideas will change too, because you'll find some things are untenable. And if things are untenable, when we have so many democratic societies, like we need to be more attentive to what both sides are thinking, because the practical reality is that we're only going to ever land on something where we can get enough people to vote on it, and you're always restricted in places by that, so you always have to contend with what the other side is thinking.
Yeah.
So,
and I'll tell you right now, I do have a lot of... Oh, sorry. Quick response. I promise. I know. I'll give an extra 10 minutes. No, I do have a lot of respect for you. I think you have engaged with me as a human being. I think that you're very thoughtful, and I could have a conversation with you where you could probably convince me of things. I believe that. Convince me of things that, or at least the ability to see things from your perspective, because I think you approach things from a honest and logical approach. That definitely considers optics more than I do, which is something I need in my life. I need to understand that better, so I respect this. I respect this conversation. I just think a lot of people, when they talk about it, and this isn't necessarily just you or all you, I see it all the time whenever people mention this, I can fix her, I can drag her my way. I see it as very patronizing. I'm like, I am a human being with my own mind. A lot of you talk to me like I am a creature that you can train to be one way or the other, and that's not going to work. That's still, it's weird to me.
yeah. And not seeing like that dimension, that it is patronizing, kind of like goes back to that rape culture thing. Some men don't see that certain behaviors like have an effect, like, oh, that's sexual harassment. I would have never like, yeah, I do that, and I didn't even fucking think how uncomfortable that would make somebody. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff like that, and that's why I appreciate being open to criticism and stuff. Like hearing that both from Destiny and from you, like makes me rethink that. And now I'm gonna have like a mental thing where I'm gonna catch myself saying that and be like, hold on, you're not trying to convince like this other person to be that way. You're gonna have a conversation with them, and what happens, because it's two very independent people. What you can do is do your best to listen and to communicate your side, and what happens is outside of your control. You know, I don't know, do you believe in God? Or
I'm a Christian, yeah.
Okay, like I would say that it's in God's hands at that point. Like you can do the best with your agency, the other person can do the best with theirs, but what happens is it's up to God. And people are going to troll me about that, but that's honestly what I think. So we have two different things we could do. one is going to be optically bad for you. So, or it may be, depending on how good you are at it.
Let's hear it.
And the other one could be just another like rhetorical like thing that I'm curious about, and I also want to know if that's something you're willing to change. So, which one do you want to do?
Honestly, you know, I've had to realize something I've needed to do publicly is I need to speak in person. I need to address people's concerns with me face to face and not do all of these prepped videos. So I am not concerned about being confronted on anything. I have nothing to hide. So it's totally up to you. Whatever you think would be more productive, more interesting, whatever you're most curious about.
Okay.
I don't care if it's optically bad for me. I'm not.
Good. Then I'll not do the optically bad one because I don't really care for that. One thing that you do, so you'll in Spanish there's this phrase that's like, if you start swinging with the monkeys you will become one, or people will perceive you as one. You'll start looking like a monkey to everybody on the ground. And I think that like a problem that you have is you are a moderate conservative. I will take you at your word that that's what you are, and that's what you say every time that you're asked. You've been consistent about that through as far back as I could look into videos about you, and you don't believe me, but I did watch a lot of your videos prior to this. Like you've always like kept that label, you know, through thick and thin, through doing the projects that you did in Europe versus now. Like you've always held true to that. But you were swinging with monkeys for a bit there, and now you're swinging with lefties for a bit here, a different breed of monkey. I think you might be interpreted like depending on whichever group you're hanging out with. Is this something that you ever consider, or is this like a phenomena that you picked up on? And if so, like moving forward with rhetoric and optics, like is it something that you're looking to address or change at all?
I think it is very easy to become the people you hang around with. Absolutely. And that is also part of the reason that I did want to come on Twitch and hang around more lefties, because I want to make sure that I can go in and out of two different worlds and stay the same, and that I'm consistent, because that means I actually believe in what I say and I'm not just swayed by crowds. I think that's super, super important. And also that when I say I want to be able to go in and out of, I mean the real world too. Taking a year break from politics and being like, am I terminally online, and are my opinions just taking place because I've got all of this constant political feedback and content coming into my brain from what I subscribe to? Going in the real world a bit, I did notice entering the real life, a very strange place. I did notice there were habits that I got online of how I interacted with people that were totally fucking insane compared to how I interact with people in the real world. I went to a feminist womb circle with a few of my girlfriends and really enjoyed it. It was like a hardcore feminist thing where people just talked about how the moon, you know, our periods cycle up with the moon and shit, and we talked about our problems as women. And you know what? I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great event.
That's rad.
Like talking to people face to face and doing that. I also got to understand a lot of, you know, how feminists act online, because some of these girls had horrific stories, like just sobbing there with us and talking about, you know, how like their husband left them when they were in the hospital having a baby, and like that fucking trauma, like the anger that you're going to let out when you talk about these political issues with men and women, that's going to be coming from a deep place of like deep personal scars. And yeah, that's an important dichotomy to understand. And if you aren't able to enter all these worlds and understand them, the real world, the left-wing world, the right-wing world, because those are all fake, then I don't think you're going to ever have a proper analysis. You're going to be looking at one part of the picture instead of, you know, the whole picture where you can judge it and analyze it properly. And if looking at the whole picture scares me, that would only be because I was afraid it would disprove my worldviews. That would only be, and I saw this with some conservatives that I really didn't like. They're like, no, just never watch lefty content. They're all stupid and dumb. And I was like, but that's what they do to us, and that's why they think we're all Nazis. Like, because they just don't watch it and assume that. They assume they already have the whole picture when they don't. So, you know, people think that politics changes or people's minds change in a year. Dude, maybe I will be a lefty in 10 years. I don't think I will be, but if I were to become one, it would take 10 years. I'll tell you right now, I don't fucking believe anyone who becomes a lefty overnight. It's bullshit. They are lying to you. They want to get a job. They're tired of, you know, I literally look at some of these de-radicalization sites where it's like, sign up and get de-radicalized today. And I'm like, that is a Nazi job hunting agency, because no one changes their views to left wing overnight. They're literally, they might as well put a swastika up in their office.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I were to become a lefty one day, sorry, people that want to slowly or drag me to the left, it would take me 10 years, because I actually really fucking consider and think about my views and would have to really, really think about that. And I have a lot of beliefs about the world that I would have to unpack over time.
Yep. You're a stubborn Nazi, and it's not going to happen overnight. All righty. Well, should I let you go? You got other stuff going on?
We've got 10 more minutes, actually. I mean, if you had any more questions, we can do that. Or maybe I can ask you a question.
Either or. Do you have anything in particular burning a hole in your brain there?
I have two. One, what are your politics, like spark notes? Do you have like a political, I know you like to kind of stay neutral and just analyze people's perspectives from your autistic perspective, which I respect. We're all on the spectrum somewhere if you're on online politics. But what are your actual politics? Spark notes.
So I don't know if I have politics because it's always depending on what's on the ballot. Like I've attended Trump rallies. I've attended Bernie barn bust things. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I don't know. I've been to a lot of different political events in real life, so it's tough to judge on that. Every time the ballot comes in, I just read whatever I have the opportunity to vote on, and then I go, okay, well, that doesn't seem like it's very good at all, or this seems like it's all right, or well, I don't have any good option here. I'm just like not going to fill this in. So I'm not a super political guy, which makes it easier to like watch these conversations, because it's like, now if I could Thanos snap something, Lauren, this is very different. I would Thanos snap this socialism shit, because that would, if that can work, that sounds perfect. Everybody gets a house, everybody gets food, everybody gets water, everything is the state. We don't have to worry about shit. We can all be poets, like, for sure. Boom. Like, free immigration, go everywhere. I can go to any country that I want, and if I like it there, I can live there, and there's no housing short. Like, that sounds like utopia. Sign me up, you know? But I think the practicality is more so what I focus on when I do political stuff, and I try not to go into philosophy too much.
Curious. You say these problems are complex. But when I say it's complex, it's like, people need answers, Lauren.
Rhetoric, optics, you gotta say it right.
You should watch my latest video on Charles Fourier. He wanted to do that Thanos snap into socialism and had some very fun ideas. Have you ever heard of Charles Fourier? He's like one of the founders of socialism.
I watched a little bit of it, but then you were not being very palatable to lefterly people, and you were talking shit on socialism, so I clicked out. You lost me.
Listen, you gotta watch the whole thing. It gets palatable. It does, I promise.
Like all of your content. I gotta watch the whole thing, but you do not make it easy, okay?
You do. I even shit on Nazis in it. You'll like it. Just watch it to the end, all right?
Okay.
But no, he perceived a society where we had mandatory hot priests that would have sex with incels, big titty priest GFs, for free. Unless you didn't live in the commune, then you had to pay for them, and you got to pick them by personality type. It was pretty, and the oceans were going to be lemonade. So I know. And we would have whale chariots. And we would send all the Jews to the Middle East on the whale chariots. So that was a bit, he got a bit weird.
Well, at least you got to that part of it with him, because you missed that like little detail when you were doing your other video about the Great Replacement shit, right? Here's a question that's more human. Do you ever feel drained by discussing politics, and in particular, like the issues that you've chosen to advocate for on the side that you've chosen to advocate for them?
Yes. I think that I remember getting to a point, and I really hated this, where I felt like I was just going through the motions, and it's like, well, time to make another video criticizing feminism. And that was one of the 10,000 compounding factors of why I took a break. I'm like, this is useless. There's nothing. Like, fucking why? This is, just fast food for people who agree with me. Which is why when I came back, I'm like, no, like I have to do something useful. I have to actually, if I want to be involved in politics, I don't just want to be, I hate this. I hate the word grifter. I hate it because I find it so often just like thrown at literally anyone who makes money in politics. It doesn't even matter if you're doing good or bad. You're all just grifters. But genuinely on a deep level, I didn't want to just do that. I want to do something that's productive. So even conversations like this.
As a follow-up to that, I know you love making documentaries. You clearly like making videos to some extent in the abstract. The topic is really what affects it. Why don't you ever choose to cover stuff that's not politics? Why continue to cover politics and political issues in particular as opposed to other stuff that you love?
I've thought about that, but I don't. Okay, here's one aspect. I like my online political world to just be about politics because I know how insane political people are, and I don't want them to seep into the rest of my life. They can have this part of me. They can have this politically passionate Lauren. You don't get to have the Lauren that likes cooking. You don't get to have the Lauren that likes brewing wine. You don't get to have the camping Lauren. You don't get to have the Lauren that enjoys her family and friends, the mom Lauren. You don't get to have that Lauren. That's not for you people. You get the politics Lauren, and that's it. That's for me. That's for my real life.
Okay, here's a follow-up then to that. If you could like Thanos snap, like make reality, a reality in which you had the same amount of people that followed you, but instead of following you for your political takes, they followed you for content about the things that you love, would you snap that into reality? Would you go back and do it that way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think there's ever going to be a day in the future where there's enough like dying down of the hate and a lot less crazies to where you'll be able to invite some more of what you love into your content, or no?
No, I'm a realist. I don't believe that. I think that, sadly, my family, I can't get into this because, like I said, I make sure to have very real, clear lines. But, my family are in danger, unfortunately, already. And it's been, it's terrifying that the conversations I have to have are always so, like, holy shit, is someone going to find out where we live? Holy shit, is someone gonna do XYZ, dox us? And these things like that have already happened. I've had notes left on my car outside my house. So no, I don't think there'll ever be a world like that. And even if we got so close to that point, the idea of one person, even just one person being on the fringes, is just too dangerous. The amount of times that people don't see that I have interactions with the police, that I've had to get like restraining orders, that I get like, I had someone that was flying to Canada and the police had to get his schedule and had made threats against me and was coming just to find me, and they stopped him at the border and were able to question him, and that took, and they found out he had all of these other restraining orders for women, and they were able to stop him. But like, imagine if I weren't so on top of that, like watching, making sure he didn't come and actually find me and my family, and he's not allowed in the country now because of those intentions that he had. So it sucks. That's just the reality, and I'm very much a realist. I don't think that'll ever change.
Like, man, that's kind of sad. Like, I'm still kind of reeling back from that. That's sad to think about. Because I wonder, like, oh man, the universe in which you like never did politics and you just did a bunch of cute shit that you actually liked. Like, I wonder what that reality would look like for you.
Think about that too. You can, if anyone wants to see that. Actually, no, I'm not going to do this. My sister, I won't tell you her channel, but my sister is a big Twitch person. She's a huge Twitch personality, and she just does what she loves. And she's a total like hippie, amazing and a cutesy world. And it's like, we are such two different worlds. She's like, what's that thing from Stranger Things? The two worlds that they are. What's the lower one called?
Oh fuck, I don't remember.
Yeah, the upside down. Yeah, my sister's like off, like living her life, doing what she loves on Twitch, and then I'm in the fucking upside down. There's an aspect of me that does love and enjoy this, absolutely, and I do have a very, I get a weird enjoyment out of, like, I like reading studies, I like doing that shit, so it's not all terrible, but politics is definitely a dark world.
Yeah. What rhetorical approaches, arguments, or people on the left have you found like effective to you in particular?
What people on the left are effective?
Or arguments or approaches, yeah. Like, I really like the way this guy talks about stuff. I may not agree with him, but I love the way he talks about it. Even something like that.
I liked Zizek's debate with Peterson. I thought he did very well in that, you know, making points about, like, great, we clean our room. That doesn't really matter if wider society is broken. You really think some random North Korean cleaning his room and getting his life in order is going to help change his life if there's an oppressive regime he's living under? So I think there's some really interesting arguments you can take from leftists that I enjoy. I actually have started, people will probably know this because one of my last debates was with a manosphere guy where I was just like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? So I follow a lot of feminist voices that I listen to, and I disagree with them on so much, but they do every once in a while have these nuggets where I'm like, that's an interesting point. That's an interesting analysis of gender dynamics. Like, one thing this is why I hate people asking me about what have your views changed, because in a lot of cases it's like little analysis of a wider problem, and it'll be like one thing here and there that I've adjusted. So like, I believe in power dynamics. I think we really need to be careful about power dynamics. I don't think power dynamics is a rape culture. So on the wider level, I'm like, oh, that still doesn't change the whole idea there. But like a man or a woman having a job and telling their secretary you should do so, or being the boss and telling their secretary, hey, you should come over and go on a date with me, that is going to create a pressure of, am I going to lose my job if I say no? And we need to talk about these dynamics that happen in our culture. And I think we need to do it on a rational, reasonable level so that we don't push people away from that conversation. So like little things like that, or immigration, that was a big one where I was like, actually, these people are victims of a corrupt system as well. Like, it's not all these fucking invaders. Like, come on, people. But because my usual conclusion still remains the same, which is I still am not for illegal immigration, or I still think feminism has a lot of issues and there's a lot of man-hatred there, and I think that their analysis of data on the wage gap and stuff is wrong. People don't care about these little changes that I make in my ideology, even if I get a lot of hate from right-wingers for making those changes. People don't care. So I'm like, all right, I'll believe what I believe and I'll make the analysis I think is correct. And that's that.
And like, you measure like kind of part of the impact or like the magnitude of the impact of these changes by like how much it makes people on your side really dislike you and how incongruent it is with their thinking. And I think because people in general have this problem of not being able to listen to others or not understanding where they're coming from, they often miss that, right? Like, they're not thinking of like, what is this person going through to say what they're going to say? Like, whether you believe Hunter Avalon or not, that he's moved over and he's trying to do stuff differently, I think it is worthy of considering what he gave up to come public with this and what he's given up to continue making videos like this. So whether you believe him or not, there is a cost there that I don't see people really like mention or give like a lot of thought to. And similarly here, like these little course corrections in how you're thinking about something invite enough nuance that it's like the other side that is your side, like, is gonna jump on that, and they're like, no, that's a huge change, like, no, I can't believe that, whatever. And like, that's part of your reality and how you measure the magnitude of it. And I think people miss that a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's a very poignant analysis, I think, accurate analysis. Something that most people probably wouldn't realize. So my audience right now that I have on YouTube, I mean, your audience probably will hate them. I think they've become such a good sphere of reasonable people. And that's because compared to what, right? So when I did that video coming back, once again, probably something none of you guys would notice, I lost 200,000 followers on YouTube. Like that, just saying I'm going to consider other perspectives. And I was like, that was like a huge moment for me where I was like, fuck you guys. You're literally so afraid of hearing I haven't said that I'm a left-winger. I haven't said that I'm a centrist. All I said is I want to consider other perspectives. If you are so threatened in your ideology that you don't want to hear other perspectives, that's all I'm presenting, then you aren't actually a conservative because you don't know what it means, because you've never heard the other side. And you're 3 YouTube videos away from becoming a communist because you've never actually had your beliefs challenged. and had to critically think about whether they're accurate in, when it's been in contest with those challenged other ideas. So I want an audience that are willing to have their ideas challenged, that are willing to take up that battle and see which idea wins out. And so I was like, man, that sucks. That's crazy. That's really disappointing. But awesome. I've got an audience that are going to be more reasonable about considering both perspectives now. And I only really noticed this like a month or two ago when I did a video on the church burnings. And I was just talking about, I did get some facts wrong about the mass graves stuff that I've been correcting, and I'm still working to correct, because I just assumed absolutely these were mass graves when it's looking like that isn't necessarily the case. So I'm going through the data there. But I talked about the fact that there were issues at residential schools and there were horrific things that happened at residential schools, and then got into the fact that, but it's still horrific to burn down churches. And my audience all took that very well. They were like, yep, absolutely agree with that. And then I went on the Daily Wire and I did an interview about it, and the initial comments, some of them were like, Lauren, you think teaching natives to not behead each other is a bad thing? Like talking about the residential schools. And I was like, and that was like one of the top comments. I was like, where did this come from? I do think Daily Wire removed those comments, not wanting the crazies there either. But I was like, these are the people that probably unsubbed for me. These are the people that probably left. And I would like to hope they would come back and consider my perspective. But you guys, like I said, the far leftists see no difference. They don't see any of that.
No. They can't see the gradient on the other side. They don't see the spectrum in the other half that they don't pay attention to. And like, oh man, there's so much I could get into there. But a question that I'll ask is, did it concern you at all to see that you had accumulated these sorts of people that were so uncritical of these ideas, and all it took was a video that, quite honestly, was still kind of meant to serve like a conservative slant and was still meant to serve a conservative audience? It still had that effect. Like, does that worry you at all? Does that like make you think about the kind of content you were producing before and the people that it's attracted, or not particularly?
It was super disappointing, absolutely, because I was like, conservatives are facts and logic people. They're, we look at the facts and the reality. We don't have these emotional reactions to literally just being told we're going to look at both sides. So that was disappointing, and yeah, perhaps I have trouble judging whether it's because, okay, so here's one thing. I talked to Destiny publicly about this as well, where when you see a cultural shift that is going one way and you feel the need to criticize it. So I felt the need to criticize the mainstream media left, and I'm like, they're getting away with way too much. I am not going to focus my time on stating things that I agree with leftists on when I feel that's already being stated publicly all the time, constantly. I'm going to focus my efforts on just criticizing what the left are wrong about publicly to try to reduce that imbalance of scales. And in doing such, people assume, and in some cases, maybe accurately, because that's all they see from me, that I have no beliefs that match up or no sympathies with some leftist, problems with the world and analysis of the world, because I spend all my time just making right-wing perspective criticisms of them, since I felt that was important to do. And you're seeing this happen with Destiny right now, where he actually hasn't changed that much in beliefs, but when he was arguing with the right all the time in debates, it was Destiny is a far leftist, cuck, freak, this, that, and now he's arguing with leftists on Twitch and showing where they're wrong, and people are like, Destiny is a fascist, racist, this, that, and the other, when he hasn't really changed his beliefs that much. But it also shows the importance of making sure that you do these debates on both sides and that you address problems on your own side. Otherwise, you just end up as bad as the people you're criticizing.
Yeah. And likewise, to insert some advice to the other side of that panel that you were on, if they would have done better to recognize that you were giving concessions to their side in admitting those things, the conversation could have moved a lot quicker, because they didn't even hear it. They kept arguing as if neither you nor counterpoints understood what the native, or you guys call them different, indigenous peoples are going through in Canada. And it's like, they literally said the opposite. You guys have to listen, and And like,
Yeah.
like you can only do so much to couple your opinion with like palatable information for the other side, and then the ball is in their court, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that was just one conversation why, like, that's why I give the Surf so much shit, because he just doesn't listen. He is like a wall. You could just say whatever and he's just reading an info document and he just repeats stats and factoids and that's it. And it's annoying. And, you know, there are conservatives, like you mentioned, that are like the facts, no feelings thing. And they can sometimes be like that once you get them in conversation as well. They're not really hearing it. And it's unfortunate because they have to listen for your effort in the rhetorical realm to pay off. But again, anybody who is just, they got you on a second monitor and they're listening, they pick up on that stuff. And that's definitely who you're speaking to. And while it's frustrating, like your interlocutor is not always that way. Like luckily on this platform, there are tons of other people listening that will pick up on that. And I think the more that you include that stuff, the more you'll find that people are thinking more positively of you. But like I tried to mention at the beginning, you have a lot of other kinds of content that were worked out the other way. So there's definitely a lot to like overcome there in terms of introducing more balanced content to get people to rethink, you know, like in terms of the rebranding thing, I think that this is what the rebranding is like you have to just be more palatable to people on the other side and make concessions where like you thought it was a given. Of course, I agree with you on this, but like those have to be included or people come with a different takeaway because all they're hearing is like, no left, no left, no left, or, you know, right's good, right's good, right's good. And then they're like, oh, this lady's just like crazy righty. She doesn't fucking believe in anything of the left. And that's not reasonable because I believe in all sorts of stuff from the left.
Yeah. Just giving me a thought. First, I don't like it being, I know what you mean. I absolutely do. I don't like it being portrayed as rebranding because that sounds like what I really don't like, which is like going and apologizing just to try to fix your career or something. Like to me, that's what rebranding is. I don't know what you'd call trying to be more rhetorically effective or trying to understand the other side more, but I don't think rebranding is the right word for it.
Okay.
And, you know, I was just thinking about what you were saying about Lance and debate in general. And so much of debate is controlling your own mental state. Like in sports, they say one of the biggest parts of sports isn't even necessarily your physical strength, but it's like your mental ability and mental strength to be able to perform well and not psych yourself out and make mistakes. And in debate, it is a huge part of that as well. So we look in this conversation, started friendly, we got heightened. And when we get into that heightened state, I had to really like consider for a second that want to just be like, fuck you, you know, not going to find common ground. And it could have kept going like that. Like we absolutely, I have no doubt in my mind that we could have kept just going. Like, this is what we disagree on. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. But that mental state of, all right, let's find what's going to be useful for the rest of this conversation and being able to work your way in and out of those gears. You need to go up to that gear sometimes when you're at a point where it's just like nothing you do. It's all brick wall. And we saw that with counterpoints with Tale of Twin Rabbits, where it was just like,
Tale of Twin Rabbits, I'm pretty sure your brain is running on 1995, okay? We're fucking 30 minutes into this goddamn debate talking about, like, I don't know, terms about fucking murder and descriptive reality and history and all that kind of shit. And you want to talk to Lauren about fucking GPR and whether or not she can offhand fucking come up with a new way to conduct anthropology? I don't give a shit. Fucking catch up.
So you need to be able to change those gears, but yeah, with Lance, there was absolutely no ability to change that gear of Lauren Connor bad, and that's how I'm going to interpret everything they say. And you will absolutely lose a debate because of that, for sure.
And it looked really bad that he threw it in a super high gear in his fucking closing statement like a little bitch. I didn't like that at all. Like, oh, now you have all these shitty things to say, huh? Interesting. Like, you sucked ass the whole time, didn't listen to anybody, had factoids, and now all of a sudden you're throwing a bunch of shit that you hadn't mentioned this entire time. Interesting.
Very curious.
I didn't like that.
I'll have that conversation with him one day, I hope. Maybe I'll just have to accept his no debate, no mod premise, which, okay, give me an honest analysis of this. I think it is sus to say, I want to do a debate, but there can be no mods. Like, that is a condition. Is that sus to you? Because that's sus to me.
Yeah, it seems sus. I don't know why. Like, I'm sure that he could give me some reason in some universe that convinces me. So I'll hesitate to say it just doesn't make any sense. But like, I can't think in my head off the top of my head like why he would want that. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and just, after pulling that, like, I'm not going to address any topics of the debate in my closing statement and just try to do this gotcha. I'm like, why would I trust you to do anything good faith, man? Like, I have to reasonably have some sort of reasonable hesitancy. So I'll try to work that out with a mod, maybe modern day debates or something. But we do need to wrap up since I need to go and get some last minute studying in for this debate I have in like 4 hours. So did you want to shout yourself out to my audience? Let them know who you are, what you do?
Yeah, of course. I hope I didn't piss all of you guys off too much. I'm not some like crazy lefty out here to burn her on a cross or something. I help people on Twitch with rhetoric. So anytime that somebody does a debate and they didn't come off well, or they weren't able to communicate a point that they wanted to communicate, I help them with that. I'll give them advice on it. There's a lot of people, especially conservatives, that I talk to behind the scenes who don't want to be named, who like I help through with that stuff. Like if they had a bad debate performance or people said a bunch of mean shit to them, then we'll go through it and I'll be like, well, don't say this. I know you don't think it's important, but like, don't say this because you'll trigger them. Or like, look at how the chat responds when you do this. Like, don't do that anymore. Here's a better way of wording it. And then I also do debate reviews on my stream, like I did for Lauren in her conversation with Counterpoints, Tailed Twin Rabbits.
It's very funny.
It is.
You should watch it, guys.
But yeah.
Awesome. Also, like, I just got affiliate, so I don't even know how this stuff works, but I think someone just donated 100 subs, which I'm pretty sure is a big deal. Like, thank you, whoever. It says anonymous, so that's amazing. Thank you, dude. And for everyone else who has been doing stuff that I don't understand with subs and biddies, whatever it is, I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Maybe one day I'll get a proper studio instead of a bed in the background. And seriously, Booksmarts. People, my mom literally sends me texts that's like, Lauren, do not swear. It's not good. You're influencing your audience. And I'm like, but I have to call him bookfucker at least once this stream. Everyone was requesting it in the chat, so there you go.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming on. We'll chat again, right?
I hope so. Yeah. Anytime. Just let me know.
Well, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you? How did it go?
Well, how do you think it went? We listened.
I think it was rough at first, and I don't think that I handled the immigration part well. I got caught in a debate when I really didn't mean to, and I felt like I got in so deep that there was no optically sound way of pulling out that I could see at the moment, and I think that costed me. But after that, I think
Curious. Why do you think that happened?
Ooh, okay. So I haven't had a chance to review the footage, but my guess would be that it was exactly what you said, that she cannot accept a claim that is more than what she did, and that upset her. And then I kept going without clarifying that very well. And I think that kind of added tension to the conversation. And then there was a breaking point, and I'm not sure where the exact breaking point was.
Yeah, a little bit. I think so. I'm going to be really razor focused. I think there was actually one thing that can save you from that ever happening in the future. Now, maybe this isn't what you meant, so I might be wrong here. But I think the issue is that for most of this conversation, when you talk, you usually say these are other people's criticisms of you. But when you got into that immigration part, I think the thing that you started saying that was setting off like the lizard brain, this would happen to me as well. I would fall for the same thing, or not fall for it. It's not like a trick, but the way that you gave voice to some of the criticisms, you made it sound like it was your criticism. So rather than like, people say this, is it reasonable that people feel this way? You know, maybe you said things that make people feel that way. You started to say like, you said some really yikesy stuff. You've made some comments.
I don't think it's crazy, Lauren. You've done some crazy shit. You've made some dumb fucking videos. I know you're going to be bad at it because you spent a lot of time being a contrarian ever since you were a little girl, and in like saying yikesy shit and in being a freaking troll. Do you really not think that like the body of your content was creating an environment where all it took was really one yikers thing for people to put the pieces together and to think negatively of you?
And I think at that point she felt like, well, hold on, he's actually attacking me now. Well, hold on, now we're going to argue about this. Because I think that's how I would hear it. If you were to say like, Destiny, don't you think that like some people could take your BLM takes like pretty wrong, but I could engage in that conversation. But if you were to start saying, Destiny, you said you wanted to kill protesters, I'd be like, okay, hold on, wait, pull out the quote books, show me, right? Because now it feels like you're making the accusation, not discussing the accusations. That's how I felt listening to it.
Okay. That's actually really, really good advice. And I'll have to keep that in mind moving forward, like, because that little change could mean like a world of difference there.
Because you go from like having a meta discussion about the conversation to now it feels like, now I'm not saying you're doing this, but I'm saying to the other person, it feels like you've inserted yourself into it, and now you're having the debate. Like, oh, I know you do that. That's my guess is how it sounds. Yeah.
What are some other like really like clearly fuck up places?
I don't think any of this was clearly a fuck up. I thought most of it was fine. Even that part, like, I think that you could fault maybe her and for getting defensive too. I don't think there's any part of this was fucked up.
Okay.
I will say one thing that I don't know if you felt this way, or maybe I just have like maybe it's just I hear everything through my perspective. Does it feel like a lot of the complaints that she echoes are kind of similar to mine?
Yeah.
Yeah. Something that's really, really hard to do that I'll kind of echo from her point of view. And I think I even said this to you before you talked. It is really hard to take out criticism when 90% of the people are making these horrible bad faith attacks against you, and maybe 10% are making like these good faith criticisms. It's really, really hard to find like the value in like, well, what, you know, where is the good criticism here that I can respond to? I think that's an issue that she was having as well.
Yeah. And I know that you mentioned that to me like before and in conversations before as well, like, oh, you're like expecting me to look at these abusive ass people who are saying like literal like mistruths and accept them. And I didn't have, and I still need to look back and figure out where this was. Naturally it came up that like we were talking about some people that were saying awful shit and how we were able to get something useful out of that. Like they're still pointing at something, and it wasn't clear to us just looking at it, but like taking in more moderate perspectives brought into focus like, oh, okay, the moderates are saying this, and now I see why the crazy people were triggered. And I think that could be helpful. But she's also dealing, like you, with a bunch of IRL people that are really fucking up her life. And I think that like, oh man, it's so tough for me to take that into account and to deal with that. But that's definitely something I need to get better at, being the guy that talks about like criticism and getting something out of the crazy people.
Yeah, because it can feel really difficult to do that. That's like sometimes almost inhuman to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a much better argument is to like stop focusing on the crazy people and start focusing on the moderates who you could reasonably reach. And I think that was something that, from my perspective, it looked like it was helpful for her to hear.
Yeah, maybe it's just really hard, and maybe we actually factually disagree on this. It feels like the loudest voices and the most popular voices are the most insane. Like when I think of like people that make criticisms of me, it's not like there's all these really good criticisms, but there's just one or two extremely far left people. Like the mainstream opinions are like, oh, Destiny hates BLM. Oh, Destiny, like now a lot of people on this platform are saying I'm like a future rapist. And that seems to be like some pretty mainstream criticism. It's not just the crazy. So that makes it even harder to try to like extract like meaningful criticism out of the crowds, I guess. Or it feels that way at least.
Yeah. And something I conceded to her as well is it's really easy to focus on those people and let that like tinge your characterization of all of the criticism of you. And I think it's really easy to just give up and be doomer because you're like, well, fuck it. Everybody that hates me is fucking crazy. You should see what my DMs are. You should see the people talking to me. And it's like, oh no, but like, if you really want to get to that side or like be able to communicate with them, like you have to focus on the moderates, not those crazy people. And like every time you find your awareness shifting to like the crazy people and characterizing everything by the crazy people, you lose out on like really helpful information. I actually think maybe dropping the idea that crazy people have something useful to give you altogether until I get buy-in on like shifting your focus there is probably better in the future.
Even if there are like a fuck ton of crazy people, if all of them are giving the same type of criticism, it has to map onto something. That there's something there, and it's good for you to understand that, even if the criticism isn't valid, you know?
For sure. Wow, I'm surprised that like there weren't other bad parts. Like in the moment I felt like it was going well, but it sounds like the immigration thing was the biggest problem. Some other people in chat mentioned like a condescending tone that's coming through with like repeating her name a lot, or let's see here, like not being clear about that this is like coaching or whatever, or like not being clear about the way that these conversations work. I still have a really hard time with condensing down what I'm trying to do into a really easy to understand TLDR. Like could you think of any way that I can do that? Some kind of like tagline or something I can say that makes clear what my intentions are? Because that always feels like a hurdle to get over. Like, I don't want to debate you. I want to like help you communicate better or understand people better.
I mean, what you're doing is very weird. Like, nobody else does this, so that's just going to be something you have to constantly overcome, I think, right?
How would you characterize it?
That's what you do. You do like debate coaching, or not even really, like just more like kind of like rhetoric guiding, optics guiding. But like every time you say that, nobody's really gonna believe you, kind of, right?
No.
You're gonna, yeah, people are always gonna be like thinking that it's like a debate or something. That's how they're gonna approach it, right?
Yeah. Okay. Did your chat say anything bad? Because I know your opinions are different from theirs. Anything that triggered them?
I wasn't watching chat as much. I was just listening and then watching a game I'm playing. I wasn't really staring at chat.
Okay.
I think reading through all of chat and then listening to you guys at the same time would have been really hard.
Okay. Then I'll probably check it out after and see what kind of nonsense they were saying. That will be helpful as well.
There'll probably be a post to my subreddit about it, so.
Oof. I hope it's positive.
They're super mad about everything relating to her, so.
Are they really? Do they not like that you're talking to her a bunch then?
No, holy shit, dude. There's like threads every single time I talk to her. There's like a thread like every other day where they're like, just so you guys know, this woman is like a subhuman piece of shit, disgusting fucking nuts. Like literally like daily or bi-daily. It's like insane.
Damn. Okay. Fuck. I know that Twitter's not going to be happy, right? Like, could you predict what Twitter might be mad about before I even look at it?
It'll be the same thing that you like didn't challenge her enough, or you're helping her with her rebranding tour. That's something that a lot of people say a lot.
Do you feel like it's fair to characterize what she's doing as a rebranding tour? Like, what is your take on that?
When you say rebranding tour, there's a grifting, like a disingenuous kind of like implication there. So like if she is legitimately like presenting her opinions and doing all of that, it's kind of weird that when you say rebranding, the implication is that it's not genuine, right?
And like, if it is, she's not doing a very good job. Like, she doesn't seem like she's super great at like convincing the other side that she had changed. She said that she didn't change in her thing.
You're actually looking at like what people are saying or whatever. That nobody cares. Nobody listens to anything she says. Nobody engages in her content. It's just she's a Nazi, and right now the current idea is that like she's just trying to make nice with everybody so that she can come in and like secretly make everybody else a Nazi again or some shit. Like that's it. Nobody actually engages with any of the subject matter. But that's true of almost everything with like online political shit.
So then they're gonna think that I'm helping a Nazi like trick people into Nazism. Is that how they're gonna interpret this?
Yes, unironically. My fan base thinks that. Yes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. Okay, so that's what I have to look forward to.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Fuck. Well, that's not going to be very fun. Oh, well, I mean, I won't say anything that'll get me in trouble being emotional about it, but that's frustrating, dude, because I don't know. I won't say anything that'll get me in
there's
trouble.
like, it's kind of like a broader critique of the left. There's this phrase called path to redemption. It really doesn't exist online. The only way you can ever like do right by like prior wrongs is to literally like come out crawling on your hands and knees saying like I'm gonna like suck off a guy named like Marx. I'm gonna nickname a dude and fuck him every day, and like I'm gonna go on like this tour where I give all my money away and like become like a Buddha. Like there is no like path to redemption for in online left-leaning spaces. So
Fuck.
And that's something that Lauren said over and over again that is probably true is like the fact that she's still a conservative. For a lot of these people online, conservatives and Nazis are literally the same fucking thing. So they don't see like a difference anyway. So
here's another side question unrelated to this. I think would you characterize what Hunter Avalon has done as a rebranding thing?
I'm going to give you the same answer. In a way it is, but I don't like the term rebranding because there's like a disingenuous implication there when you say that, when you say rebranding. Yeah. Because it's I mean, like, yeah, in a way it kind of has, but I mean, like, I wouldn't call it rebranding, Tor.
Okay. Okay. Do you think I did harm by having Lauren on and talking with her? Like, were there points where I'm giving like too much credence to ideologies that could be harmful or something like that? Did I ever do that?
No, I don't believe in that shit anymore. Especially over the coronavirus shit and everything. My biggest thing right now is just misinformation. It's the number one thing that drives me crazy. And I think both sides of the left and right engage in this in equal levels. That the left and the right will engage in this massive amount of misinformation online, and that is the number one thing that I'm concerned with. I don't give a fuck at this point about like harmful ideologies or any of that shit, because I believe that misinformation is the most harmful thing in the world right now. I don't like, I'll take the L, give me the clips or whatever. I don't care about like 2 or 3 or 4, like the mass shootings or whatever, where, you know, 100 people have died. I care about like the misinformation that has made it so that people won't get fucking vaccinated, to where people are having these insane political opinions about getting rid of all the police, where people don't know about anything that's going on overseas, where like these things are destroying all of society. And I think they are so much more important than like a mass shooting or something. I think that it's absolutely destroying this planet. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have much sympathy for the victims of shootings, as we already know.
Good one.
I appreciate the advice beforehand. Refocusing on what the purpose of it was really helped me to like give up on the idea of appeasing those Twitter people. And I think that helped a lot, because I would have lost a lot of rapport from her to like have approached this the way I was going to approach it. Like, oh man, I was getting so fucking shifty with it. I was going to like, I don't even think I should talk about it, but like I was thinking about pacing and like going fast and slow, doing slow questions at first, and then doing this like lightning round where she gives me 3 sentences about some different ideas in a list. And I'm like, okay, ice cream, Obama, Richard Spencer, white replacement, like just like going to like, oh man, very, very good that I didn't do that, I think.
Yeah, that would have been pretty intense.
You get a picture of Mooten's beautiful face for a second while I get the other window.
Why is that his background?